the Lady of Amritsar, the Bhangra Daytimers, Malaga, Waterloo Place, Governor of the Punjab, Anita Briones Delgado, Tower Hamlet, Madrid, Guru Ka Bagh, Morcha, Savoy Hotel. He took Amrit, Charles Freer Andrews, Sikh History, Empire, Berlin, the Old Kent Road, Dublin, the Maharajah, Newcastle, Jinnah, 1920s, Cambridge, Sikhs in Malta, wife number 5, Australia, Manchester, the Sikh Kingdom, Hampton Court, Iceland, the Atletico Madrid Stadium, London, San Marino, World War I, Brighton. So I don't think there's any country that I can't find you Sikh history.
What's going on, everyone? It's Ramblings of a Sikh here with another podcast episode. A quick welcome to all the new viewers and a huge welcome back to all of those who are returning. Today I get the chance to talk to a London-based researcher who has created innovative walking tours within the UK, Europe and further afield, all relating to Sikh history. On top of that, we discuss so much more, so don't forget to watch this video until the end, and please make sure to like, comment and subscribe, as this really makes a difference to us. On top of that, you can find a timestamp breakdown of the full conversation in the description below. Now, with all of that out of the way, all I can say is let's get straight into this.
Thank you for having me today. Looking forward to this Q&A with yourself, because I think I've listened to at least half a dozen of your ones with other esteemed and distinguished guests, and I think I'm just looking forward to the opportunity to having this chat.
Oh no, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, and especially coming from someone who spent it's now been over 10 years, 14 years now that you've spent focusing
14
on
years probably,
if not more.
Well, in the social media space, I suppose. But I think when we go through our story, I think it's as far as I can remember, really.
Oh wow. Okay. So we'll definitely hold on to that then. So, as always, I'd love to start to get to know a little bit more about yourself. I guess in essence, what we're trying to find out is, who is Rav Singh? Okay,
so who is Rav Singh? I think, you probably won't even find that I'm on any official name, because that's a nickname, right? My full name's Ranveer Singh. Grew up with various spellings of Ranveer on my NHS passport. Everything was different. I think my dad went somewhere and the lady just spelt it a French way, went to school and spelt it an English way, went to Punjabi school and spelt it a Punjabi way. So I grew up with all these different documents with different variations: Ranveer, Ranveer, with an IR, EER, IER. So when I got my consciousness about my own name, I just became Rav, and it was just Rav Singh. So that was probably around post GCSEs. So I'm a London-born Sikh, raised in the east side of London, studied in London university-wise. And then since I started work, I actually started work on the 6th of January 2000. So right at the dawn of the millennium, after the bank holidays, and been working non-stop for a long time. And that's taken me into the public sector, the private sector, the public-private sector, first in London, then the regions, and then across the UK and around the Dominions, around the islands. And since 2013, I have my own small project management practice. I work aligned to a company called One Consulting Group, which I helped set up. And I work on a range of projects in the public and private sector. A lot of that means you have project management time, downtime in the week, evenings in hotels. And really the little history journey has kind of grown with my own working career. And now the way I've done it, because I have my own practice, I'm master of my own Microsoft Outlook diary. And what that means is I can block out time and do things during the daytime when it's Sikh history, then catch up with work in the evening if I want to, or indeed don't do full-time work anymore. In the summer, little history takes over, and in the winter, real work takes over.
That is amazing. That sounds like a perfect balance. So how long have you been balancing the two, or has that kind of been something that you've always done?
Yeah, so I think, when you look at how I grew up in Newham, East London, and I think it's kind of what I call the land of the 7 gurdwaras or something. It's just, gurdwaras are everywhere in Newham. You have 2 on one road, Ramgarhi and Neville Road. Rosebery Avenue is walking distance away. The Namtari Sangat is near Ramgarhi and Neville Road. Ravi Dasia's is not far away. Baba Namdev Community Centre was literally opposite our house. And then Barking, and then Seven Kings and Ilford, all these came later, but really they were all within Newham. So I think, we probably didn't step out of Newham, because everyone just, until I was probably 15, 16, everything's at the Gurdwara, every family functions at the Gurdwara, every wedding's at the Gurdwara. It's going to be one of those. So it was very much an M25 life. You don't really leave the M25. Our Punjabi school was there in the 80s. Then I started playing sports for the Ramgarhia Sports Centre in the 90s. And the flick switch was when I went to university. So I find that most Sikh kids do it the other way around. They grew up in a very non-Sikh environment and discover Sikhi at university. I was like a grounded Sikh proper. I could read Punjabi, do the parts, play the tabla, do all of that, play table tennis for the Gurdwara, do all of that until 16, 17, 18. And then when I went to university, I only had a very small role in the Sikh society because I just wanted to discover everything else. We only had 5 or 6 Sikhs at that time at Imperial College I studied. Very small Sikh society. We kind of helped each other get through, but a lot of it wasn't, we didn't have a big society. So it was really Kings was down the road. So you did things with Kings if you wanted to collaborate. And really, we were just happy to just sit together and eat most days. And that was our Sikh society, in the canteen, catch up over lunch and then go back to your lectures and practicals and whatever. Physicists. We didn't have a medical school on site. So there was very few Asians. It was all engineers, foreign students, making the most of the South Kensington campus. So I remember that. And I remember when they said Sikh society elections, I think my grandmother always told me, do whatever seva you want, but don't become a committee member. And I've kind of lived with that kind of blessing all my life.
Oh, wow. That is amazing. What was it that spurned you to do your own research? Because I think a lot of people are quite happy to just learn it off family members and kind of take that for gospel. But what was it that made you question that and go, hold on, I'm going to go look for it myself?
That's quite interesting because in the 90s, this kind of, so being in the Gurdwara, speaking Punjabi, Japji Sahib, Rehra Sahib, Vaisakhi programs, Guru Nanak Dev Ji's Gurpur programs, no problem. We knew we had to recite a poem, we knew we had to do this Kirtan. Punjabi school teachers are like your extended family. So they, if your Masi says you have to do something, you have to do something, right? And my parents respected our Punjabi school teachers and, you can't upset them, right? So that's fine. That's how I learned to wear my dastar for Punjabi school programs, etc. But we had something in East London where there were a couple of collectors. There's one by the name of Dawar Singh Bara, who you may have come across. His father did an exhibition in 1999 at the Ramgarhia Gurdwara. And what he did was present a lot of stuff like you have on your wall, a lot of newspapers, a lot of framed items, beautifully framed. And it just was actually Sikhi might be a little bit more than just the routine that we were used to, okay? Seed planted, very nice. He actually had a gun with him that day that was belonged to the bodyguard of Maharajah Ranjit Singh, and he could trace it all the way back. So for some kids, it was that.
Yeah.
But for me, it was just, these are newspapers, and I read newspapers. It's got the Golden Temple in it, and wow, it's Harmandir Sahib. I was also then at university, so Notting Hill Market wasn't far away. And we had an experience with the Victorian Albert Museum. And all of these things around the dawn of the millennium kind of showcased that actually Sikhi was not just within the Gurdwara environment, that there was Sikhi outside of the Gurdwara that was accessible. Let's just say it was accessible. Now, the V&A Museum reached out to our Sikh Society and they said, could you help support us, run it? What they really meant was, could you just sit at the entrance and guide people to where it is in Punjabi, So I was usually sitting on Wednesday afternoon, while probably Davinder Dul was inside learning all the great stuff from Susan Strong. I was sitting outside with my chemistry book underneath the thing. And as soon as a coach from Derby or Birmingham thing, all the BBR got off, because it was mainly generally elders who were coming, in the week, not during the weekends. And in the week they would come and I would just say, Hanji Benji, toilets that way, Hanji Badi, toilets that way, because they all want to go to the toilet first and then they want to go to the exhibition. I remember doing that. And to be honest, with our group, they all did that. We all did that on different days. There was just a bug at the entrance, Sikh exhibition that way, And whilst we're sitting there bored, we could just revise our notes for practicals. But when I did go into the exhibition, it kind of helped you understand about the empire, about the throne was being more prominently displayed, other aspects of artifacts. And then later in that summer, I was in Trafalgar Square. In Trafalgar Square, there's a Havelock statue. On the back of the Havelock statue, it says the Ferozepore Regiment of Sikhs. And at the front of the statue, it says, "Soldiers, your labours, your privations, your sufferings will not be forgotten by a grateful country." I was like, hold on, we're in Trafalgar Square. It says 1857, so we know it's the mutiny. It says, "Soldiers, your labours, your privations, your sufferings, and your valour will not be forgotten by a grateful country." Then you walk around the back and you got a citation, the Ferozepore Regiment of Sikhs. So then I went to see Avtar Bara because he started doing my framing, and I said to him, "Avtar, I've seen this statue, and on the back it says the Ferozepore Regiment of Sikhs. What's this all about?" And then he explained the mutiny and explained the story. And then I researched it a little bit more. Then I found out that it was James Altham, who wrote that in his diary. So then from his diary, it was the war cry that Havelock gave to his Sikh soldiers when they were in Lucknow battling against the mutiny. And when they were doing that, they saved the lives of 400 women and children. And Havelock said, "Soldiers, your labours, your privations, your sufferings, and your valour will not be forgotten by a grateful country." And it's memorialised in Trafalgar Square. And about 10 years later, we're having all this Vaisakhi and the square stuff, going on. Maybe at that time, it was very, let's just say, Punjabi culture orientated event, and what they would do is they would board up this statue because, people would damage it, they would think, because there's going to be 10,000 people in the square. They would board it up, and then all you would find is people putting their langar plates on it, And I was just like, people need to know this story somehow, I just don't know how to do this. It was about 10 years after that EY, there was a gentleman there, Lovepreet Singh, gave me the opportunity to actually present at Trafalgar Square and tell this history. And what I did is produce a self-guide map. You'll find it on our website. And we produced a map because there's about 10 other items just around Trafalgar Square of Sikh history. So while you're here, you're in Trafalgar Square, you've come on all these coaches, all these Sikh histories around you, but all you're interested in is samosa pakode, filling up your bag and then going back home, day out in London, with the sunglasses on, take a few photos. And it was turning into that kind of event. And I haven't done that one again. Now it's a totally different event. It's much more, thought about, and it's the message of Vaisakhi. So it was different. But in those days, they just used to go, we'll get Malkit Singh down, do a few songs, and then, people can dance. And that's what they did.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. So just picking your brain then on kind of the 90s for yourself. I think, considering you've listened to some of the previous podcasts, I'm sure you've picked up on how the exhibition in 1999 and the Susan Strong one is very, very instrumental in the work that a lot of people in this area now do, including yourself, including Devinder Toor, including Amandeep Madra. And they're just the three people that I've had the chance to talk to who have all expressed very similar.
But for me, see, they were more confident. They said, "We want to do this, and we want to go all out and do it." Right? I've met Aman in Norfolk at the unveiling of the statue. Bought his book when he had a little tent and a table. Devinder, I don't really know at all. But what they've managed to do with whatever inspiration they had was like phenomenal, and we've just kind of caught on their coattails at the back, trying to think, well, surely, and my story is a little bit different because I focused on a totally different demographic, I think, right, which we'll get into. But for me, the seed was sown that there is a lot of Sikh history around us. The 1999 exhibition, I think I took for granted. I just thought Sikhi is the 6th largest religion in the world. This kind of stuff must happen all the time. The fact that it hasn't happened for the next 23 years to that scale. And I know Amandeep and Devinder have done great exhibitions at SOAS, every 2 years, they were wonderful. But the V&A, I work with the V&A now, the clout they can put behind an exhibition, the numbers are phenomenal. You had 500,000 visitors, at the V&A one. I'm working with palaces, I'm working with other people now, and the numbers that a mainstream organization can get are just phenomenal. And the amount of prachar you can do, if you can just get the right words, the right thing, it can open up their own learning. And that's the market I'm trying to tap into now. But what we did for 10 years, we just worked on our own solid ground, and I'll explain the kind of difficulties I had then. But now we can step out of the Sikh space, I think, with that grounding,
Two questions that I hope you don't mind me asking, and they're slightly more contentious topics, especially at the moment. So one is how, so one is, and I've had this debate with a few other people, or asked them, anyway, I think I asked Amalit Madhav in particular because he has an OBE as well, which
Yeah.
is, so for someone who studies Sikh history, there's always, especially nowadays anyway, there's this debate that is kind of like you can't be in the British Army or a national army and then claim Sikhi, so to speak, yeah, quote unquote. These aren't necessarily my words, but the argument that's put forward.
All right, let's get into this.
Yeah. Now, for me, I personally, I don't think you can necessarily, I can't, and no one else can kind of say whether someone else is or isn't. And I personally think it's a completely down to the individual. And also historically looking at stuff like the British Indian Army during the British Raj, I think it's extremely difficult for anyone in that kind of social economic makeup to somehow all of a sudden be like, no, I'm not going to become a soldier because of whatever. And like, as in everything, as Amalit Madra said, everything is telling that person to join the army, financially, economically, socially, everything that goes with that.
How do we do this? Because I can do it through two lenses. I can do it through my lens as well. Me as an individual, when you said, who are you? I said, I'm a London-born Sikh, right? I choose those words very carefully, right? Because that's what I am. This Bagh does not mean I'm a Kenyan immigrant, right? It's inherited from our family teachings, us how to tie the star, and I'm definitely not Indian born. When I go to India, I feel like a stranger. I'm treated like a stranger. I'm treated like an economic opportunity by anyone. You know, everything's, whatever it is, I don't know if it's the way we just spend money more easily because it's the conversion factor, but other than the gurdwaras, I don't feel at home in India, you know, other than the visits to the gurdwaras, which have historical importance for me. But everything else I look around India, you come back with sadness, you know, that this opportunity, the way Punjab investment doesn't work, job opportunities always in Canada rather than in Punjab. So I've never felt at home, and it might be the accent, it might be the style of the dastar, but whenever you go shopping, it's stress. If you go to the bank, it's stress. Everything you do in India, it doesn't support you just making your life easier, you know, it's hard work, you know, just doing things. So I've never felt at home in India. And then when you come to England, no one thinks you're British because of the bug you wear, the way you think. So if I tell people born in London, studied in London, can speak any Cockney accent you want me to speak and I can understand it, you know, they don't believe you at first, right? Because they just assume second, third generation, you shouldn't, you know, your name should be John Singh by now or Steve Singh by now, right? So I've never fitted in there and I don't fit in here. So I've grown up in an area where Sikhs are not the majority. We probably only had one or two Sikhs in our class and we were good friends, maybe 2 or 3 Sikh girls, 2 or 3 Sikh boys, that's it. And then the Gurdwara was your safety net to be brought up within your own community. I'm now living in an area that I never thought I would have lived in before. It borders on an area which did select a lot of BNP councillors when I was in this area. And yet more Indians are moving in, more Asians are moving in, right? So that's one thing. So when we look at how do I feel about the British system, you know, at the end of the day, my passport is British, right? You know, and I align with the fact that, and I went through this in my own journey, everything I was discovering was that activism, that history thing, and you go through these emotions, you know, but when I take groups to these places, I'm viewing them, at least discussing those emotions and their views, and at least we can do it in a friendly environment without accusing people of anything. I go to these museums and I describe what they've got as belonging to a great empire, and it was taken from a child, you know, and put on this list and brought over and given away as a trophy. And they're listening to me now and they're saying, oh, we understand now what we have in our collection. How can we tell this story? You know, it's not going to be a quoit captured on the battleground. It's going to be a chakra that's been taken from a Nihang Singh in this style. And when you bring that to life, they're interested. The people I meet are interested. They're not here saying, you know, so I don't know politically why the message always gets mixed up, you know. Yes, these items are here. Yes, the museum that has it has provenance of how they got it, right? They have that. But ultimately, we know another version of how, deals were done at that time and the kingdom was annexed. And that story at least needs to be discussed and told. And all the books behind me and all the books behind you, all people have to do is just pick them up and read them and let them make their own mind up, Why do we want to be in this thing where we can't, any individual, we're on a Sikhi learning journey. I'm on a Sikhi learning journey. You're on a Sikhi. So the same thing on our history. Read it yourself and come up with your own sources and read the whole spectrum. Don't just read one side of it, because the people I know in the Defence Sikh network, they know this history as well. They know about the Anglo-sikh wars. They know about the annexation. But equally, they're getting an opportunity to do jobs that no other job would give you in the UK. They're going and they're doing mission control and logistics and everything while I'm going into an office and sitting in front of Excel all day, right? It's just like, it's giving you an opportunity to build your skills, and I think they are interested in what they have, why they've got it, how they got it. And if we can inform that learning and translate it, it must give us a platform to put Guru Nanak's way forward.
No, definitely. I guess in a nutshell, what you're saying is that you're aware of the nuance to the history, so ensure that you share kind of a more realistic version of events, which is
both sides of the story.
Yes, which is brilliant.
I think definitely. So. But there's an art of communicating that without getting defensive. We're quite hot-blooded. I have these discussions in a gurdwara and I have these discussions in a museum. And in a gurdwara, sometimes I'm just like, well, I can't change what you're gonna say because you've learned it in this way. You've opened your eyes, and I'm not challenging that. I'm just saying there is another part of the story. If we could get 2, 3, 5 things to just speak in a circle, listen to each other, and come up with a consensus or a debate is fine.
Yeah, you don't have to agree, right? As in, we can agree.
I don't agree with most of the stuff my own family tell me, right? I don't go around beating them up or anything.
Completely.
My own family tell me so much ingrained stuff that I know is propaganda. But because it's on a TV channel or the newspaper they read, they believe it.
Yeah, I know. There's a brilliant recent example that I can give to you of that is obviously there's all of this kerfuffle with the Kohinoor at the moment. So I just posted a brief history of what's happened to the Kohinoor, and because I've recently been reading Sohan Lal Suri's Chronicles of Maharajah Ranjit Singh Ji. Within that, he says himself numerous times that Ranjit Singh wanted to give the Kohinoor to Jagannath Puri, right? So I've shared that, and everyone, I don't know how many comments I've had, have been like, no, this is wrong. He wanted to give it to Harmandir Sahib. He was a Sikh. He wanted to do this. And I'm like, well, no, he didn't. Just because our modern religious sensibilities.
Just quote the sources and have a debate. And I think when I started Little History, everyone just thought it's the throne at the V&A and the Kohinoor at the Tower of London. How many tours can you run on just those two? I'm just like, mate, it's a lot more than the Kohinoor. And since 1999, it's a lot more than the Golden Throne of Maharajah Ranjit Singh, right? And I've purposely avoided the Kohinoor in my tours. We've never done a tour with the Kohinoor. There's no need for it because everyone thinks they know that story already.
Yeah.
They know it all. To do with the Kohinoor.
And everyone's convinced that they know the truth as well.
So I don't even entertain the Kohinoor.
No.
We made a video at the Albert Memorial, and I just traced how the process of the Kohinoor being presented and cut, and all the places it's been around London, and the fact that most Indians will say they go to the Tower of London, they'll pay probably £80 for a family to get in, to be on a travelator to go across. They won't even realise which diamond is the Kohinoor. They'll think they'll know which one it is. And then they'll come to the other side to see a storyboard about it, right? That's your experience. But you can see it for free at the Natural History Museum. You can just go upstairs and they've got a stone replica of the Kohinoor sitting there in their minerals gallery, right? The same lighting on it, the same everything. So I say to people, and you can see a dinosaur. So
why not? Yeah, I'd rather go to the Natural History Museum.
And it's got the Kohinoor in the mineral gallery, the vault upstairs, right?
Well, that's a little secret you wouldn't find out from anywhere else. So I'm glad you shared that.
There's lots like that. So that's how these tours have all kind of connected together.
That's amazing. The second question I wanted to ask you was, considering you work with all of these museums and different kind of
and institutions
and everything else that goes on, you must be well aware of how many items these organizations hold, and a lot of them, from what I've gathered kind of
It's in the
along the way,
archives.
yeah, just sit in storage in the archives. Now, two questions I guess out of this. One, which is a little bit selfish, which is, if I want to dig into these archives, if I want to go see them, who do I get in touch with? Because I
Right. So
actually
I mean,
want to
the
get
best
involved.
thing is you have to be polite and you have to be professional. That's the two things you need to do. I'm going to give you an example of the Maidstone Museum, right? They're a small museum in Maidstone. They have a beautiful Satlug gun cannon, an amazing, exquisitely carved cannon, sitting 20 minutes away from the Gravesend Gurdwara from Maharajah Ajit Singh. And it's much better than the cannons I can show you elsewhere in the Royal Armouries, right? This one was treated like a trophy at the end and enhanced with the battles. It's got elephants on it. It's got everything. Beautiful, right? So I went there, went to have a look at it. We're going to be making a video on it soon. But then I get to know the people and the volunteers, and they go, oh, Mr. Singh, maybe you want to come upstairs and I'll show you something else, right? So Gurinder Singh Maan has been working with them to look at one of the Nishan Sahibs from the battles, and they found that. But I went on a few other trips later, and they've shown me the jacket of Lieutenant Grimes, the blood-soaked jacket of Lieutenant Grimes. Lieutenant Grimes died because he was struck here by a Sikh sword, and the blood dripped down the jacket. 170 years later, and they've still got the jacket, and they show you, oh, this is all his blood struck by a Sikh sword, and they've got a Sikh sword there, that potentially could have killed him, and then they show you a bhatna, a bowl picked up from the battlefield, from a Nihang Singh probably, and they show you all these things, and you can have an afternoon of learning. And what can I do with that stuff? All I'm asking them to do is bring it out a bit more if people attend, but if people don't attend and ask for it or request it or write to them and say, I understand you've got these in your collections, then all they can do is digitize it, put it on a digital thing. And then the problem, like you said, Amr, is they're not going to say it's a Nihang Singh Bhatta. They're going to say it's a bowl picked up on a battlefield. And if it's a bowl, you're never going to find it on your searches, right?
Durham University, a year and a half ago, I was going through their online digital archives, and they've got some images. I'm not sure when they're from. I think 19th, 18th century. Well, probably not. 19th century, most likely. And there's one of, I think it's of Jamdar Kushal Singh, but only because Amandeep Madra enlightened me as to who it was, because it's actually titled Maharajah Ranjit Singh, because the person who's been drawn has a halo, but it's not him. It's obviously this Jamdar Kushal Singh, who obviously isn't as important as Maharajah Ranjit Singh, but because they have no idea who this person is, they've just mistitled it. And then there was another one of Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji, who they had also titled as Maharajah Ranjit Singh. And to any kind of Sikh, even like I could probably pick my 6-year-old niece up and she'd be able to tell me that that's Guru Tegh Bahadur Ji. But some of these institutions just don't have, they just lack that bit of knowledge to
but then
really.
We have to just help them, don't we? We have to help them, and we have to be professional, and we have to approach them in that way. And then I think opportunities start opening up, because I'll describe, some of the relationships I've had with these people. They come to me and I think, why are you coming to me? Why are you not going to Amandeep for this or going to someone else?
Yeah.
Because in the old days, that was the only place you could go to. You do a Google search, Peter Bance, UKPHA. That's the only two that used to come up. But now I'm getting like the Antiques Roadshow phoning me up and saying, can you give me a review of this? And I'm like, how did you find me? And they go, oh, we just did a Google search,
Yeah. I remember a few months ago, actually, I had Antiques Roadshow message being like, do you
They're
have
doing the same thing, the church. Yeah. So they're doing the same thing.
Do you have anything that you can bring to auction? And I was like, no.
We had 2 items we took down there. They did the viewings, they did the thing. But you know what? You spend first 15 minutes educating the expert, and then the expert tells you that back for 10 minutes on the thing. And then someone comes in to give you a price, and they ask you the value of it beforehand.
It's just an ornate kind of tapestry.
That's just one, but we've had so many different ones that are quite interesting, so people come in to make documentaries from Singapore about Maharaj Singh, and they're doing some work in London in the archives, and they just want to go around and see. We've had all these kind of different kind of requests, but we'll probably come on to some other interesting stories, but it's been varied. I think having my own website has really helped. Before I just relied on Facebook. But in COVID, we kind of published our own website. We did a highly designed website not a standard WordPress, you know.
Yeah. No, I like your website. I think it's definitely useful having something that exists outside of social media. And especially with things like Facebook, they're dying. Like Facebook's slowly dying.
Tell me, I mean, I can tell you now, you know,
Yeah.
that it doesn't reach Instagram, and I think just WhatsApp groups works for me best now. You know, just send it to.
So I find it really interesting when some of my podcasts are released, because YouTube obviously shows you analytics, and in the back of it, sometimes I see that like I'm getting all of this traffic from WhatsApp, and I'm like, oh, it's obviously reached the WhatsApp aunties. So it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Definitely.
No, and I think that one I've noticed, you know, it's much better for recruiting
yes.
numbers, you know.
So just then, kind of rewinding a little bit, then, how was it growing up in East London?
The thing for me is like, as I explained, surrounded by Gurudwaras, very comfortable in a Gurudwara environment. Your social life is whatever the Gurudwara can offer you. I used to play sports for the Gurudwara, hockey and table tennis, and that brought you competing against other Gurudwara teams, you know, the Ramgarhia circuit on all those sports, collecting trophies that are well oversized for the effort that you put in a Punjabi tournament, you know. So you would play in the Redbridge League for 36 games and you would get a little medal. You'd go to like beat two of your friends at a Ramgarhia trophy and you get like a massive trophy from the Gurudwara. So I remember all of that. But at university, when things changed, I think for me, it was languages, speaking languages, having that reading around wider people and getting to know people from around the world. And it's all kind of sowing the seeds. And then when I started work, you kind of assume, you know, your offices would be mixed, right? Or reflect London. But when you start joining companies and bigger companies, and, you know, basically it is white male, white female, Asians and Black community a much lower number. And you kind of think, I'm still standing out, you know. So you didn't stand out at school because they were all Asian kind of in East London. But through my working career, I worked initially in a field called regeneration. So it's kind of a hybrid of multiple government departments. They source their money together and they regenerate areas. So London was on its kind of third wave of regeneration, that kind of Canary Wharf type stuff. So we're not architects, we're not planners. We just make things happen through projects, you know. So I learned that, worked in Stratford, which was when the Olympics was coming in and regenerated, but we didn't get any work out of that. And then ended up working for a FTSE 25 company where it's all about sales and business process outsourcing. But during my whole career, 13 years of probably working for 23 different London boroughs, and then working for regional and national government, I don't think I've come across even a turban wearing Sikh in all 13 years, you know. And that's amazing. But the field is regeneration. It's people, generally regeneration was a 90s idea by the Labour government. And then it was people, lawyers at the end of their careers would try and give back to the community by doing regen. And now it's an industry, but it doesn't have its own government department. So if you're at uni, you would say, I want to do education or medicine, and then, you know, that's a career. Regeneration was kind of like a hybrid. So, and I did my master's in European structural funding for European programs, you know, and government, UK government. So when I did all of that, I was just like, where are, you know, like, I'm always standing out, you know, and that was fine. But then if you're confident about your Sikh, you just use that as a platform, because I think it has given me a lot of job opportunities. Because when you go in an interview, I've interviewed above my colleagues with more experience, and then I get the job as a consultant, and you feel bad because that person is your senior. We went for an interview and they're picking the consultant team and you get it. Then about 6 months later, you realize, oh, the person, he tells you over a coffee or something that his sister-in-law is Sikh, or his
it's a positive bias, isn't it?
Yeah. So when they were hippies in the 60s, they went to Amritsar and had langar, and they never forgot. So I said, you picked me above my senior based on these things, but they won't tell you straight away. They only tell you when they trust you, that they've come across some positive experiences of a Sikh. And then when they see one with a full beard and at the start, and they think, well, we'll have him on the team. You know, imagine that. We do battlefield tours and we get dragged to people's barns, you know, and they say the Sikhs used to live here, and they speak Flemish. They don't even speak French. So I can get away with French and Italian, but, you know, and Amandeep's had the same. You know, you go to these little graveyards, in France, and then the locals will pull you in, and they'll start talking to you, and they're just so happy to see you. And then you wonder why the French are struggling, Sikhs are struggling in France, with their identity politically, I've just found we do south of France and north of France. I haven't done Paris tours publicly yet, but that'll be interesting then, because we're all going to be a group of Sikhs in Paris, In France and Belgium, I have no problem in the north, because they're just such small villages. I don't think they give they don't give a crap about what Paris is telling them, as long as they're. So no, my working career always meant that I stood out, but because you build personal relationships with people. I've worked in Jersey, Guernsey, and the Isle of Man. And can you believe I've met people there that have been to Amritsar? And then you think, is that why you gave me the job? Because you've been to the Golden Temple?
Positive bias that I'll happily take. I remember when I was tutoring before COVID and everything kicked in, a lot of the Sikh parents that would get in contact with me to tutor their kid, they wouldn't be bothered about any of my credentials. They'd be like, yeah, you're a Sikh, it's fine, you can tutor him. I'm like, I could be anybody. I'm not complaining, and I took it on board and loved it. And I think the other place where I experienced this, and I recommend it to anyone, is I had the opportunity to go to Jamaica before lockdown. And I swear to God, I have never, ever been treated as well as I've been treated anywhere else in the world.
Well, I've met lawyers in England who had to study Rastas and Sikhs because of the 81 Act. It was always Rastafarian and Sikh. I was in Reykjavik in Iceland, just get stopped in the middle of the high street. Why Gurujika Khalsa, why Gurujika Fateh, from a, like an Icelandic person. My wife's going, I said, it happens. So what? It happens all the time. So what? I can go to any part of the world and they'll spot a Singh, and they'll spot. So that was a university years really. And then, finding that London, the other thing was we used to walk a lot around London, and you could just spot these things, like, for example, where people used to come and park their car in Pall Mall for the gigs in Leicester Square, the Bhangra daytimers. Where you parked your car in Pall Mall, it's called Waterloo Place car park. It's a free car park after 6 o'clock, right? So you would park your car there and they'd go to the daytimers. But in the corner is standing a statue of John Lawrence, and it says Governor of the Punjab. And I've been to loads, and I said, see, look, there's your ruler after Maharajah Singh, And you just say to her a couple of things when you say he was the one who ruled afterwards, and they go, what? It says Punjab there. I said, yeah, well, you just got to open your eyes and look at this stuff. There's loads of it around.
That is amazing. So before we move on then, why is there, so besides things like the pillar in Trafalgar Square, like the statue of Lawrence and all of these other kind of random bits that are scattered around London, are they mainly there as kind of memorials that were built soon after whatever event happened, or are they things that have been memorialized a lot further on?
So my work on this kind of shows that in the kind of Victorian era, they've just annexed a kingdom, which is probably one of the richest kingdoms in the world at the time, GDP-wise, wealth-wise, arts-wise, and everything. And anyone who survived in India, didn't die of malaria, for example, and came back very, very wealthy, and I just kind of assume it's like Google, so you would say, like, I want a job at Google. And then about 10 years later, you've got so much money that you could be making stately homes and doing this, that, and the other. So when they come back, they were then benefacting loads of things in the UK. And then because of that, they were being memorialized. Now, for example, Trafalgar Square, the statues came much later. They came around 40 years after the actual square opened. But that was the time when these generals were retiring and coming back from India. And two of the statues there in the corner, one's the king, the two are generals from India, one with the Anglo-sikh wars and the Sindh wars, and then the other one's General Havelock from 1857, right? So the two front statues next to Nelson are so closely associated with India and Punjab. I can just do a tour around there, And then you've got a cherry and a mosquito in the other corner, right? So, a cake on a cupcake. So that's it.
So my just a question off the back of that then is, why has that history not necessarily been retold since then? So obviously, I understand that the people at the time who are paying for this, so to speak, have have their own interests at heart in terms of setting up these memorial statues, whatever you want to call them. And I also understand the culture at the time
because they were
values,
contributing and they were part of government and etc.
And obviously the society at the time would have almost seen them as like signs of how powerful and how great Britain was and how amazing society is and all the rest of it. And obviously,
why haven't we told this in? I just think it's that whole thing about empire. We don't learn about empire even at GCSE history,
no, we don't.
A-level history. We World War I, World War II, Germany, history of medicine. I think is in the syllabus now, and and so you have to pick up a book yourself, and you have to just. And I think it starts from who am I? So at some question you're going to ask yourself. Even a kid's going to, through an art project or through something, they can say, who am I? Am I really just Upton Park born West Ham Singh? Is that my whole life? Is just following two football teams? And if they then say, what did my granddad do? When did my granddad come here? Then slowly, they'll pick up a book and they'll go back to Punjab. Then they'll go back to, or you'll do it through the Gurdwara, where it's all about the 200 years Guru Nanak Dev Ji to Vaisakhi 1699. And then we don't learn about 18th century, the struggles of Sikhi then. And yet it's all in the Langar Hall, but no Punjabi school teacher has ever told you about it.
True. And often the 200 years that you are taught is very, it's a very popular kind of mainstream narrative that doesn't necessarily look into some of the nuances.
So I think there's learning's going to have to come from family, your own research. And if you get the bug, then you'll do something with it. If you don't get the bug, at least you learnt it, right? So,
no.
At least you can challenge. At least you can spot propaganda when you see it.
No, definitely. So, from university, then explain as to the journey from kind of that point into then eventually starting or setting up a little history of the Sikhs.
Yeah. So, in 2003, so I finished uni 99, started work in 2000. We had a couple of years of doing an iconic theatre play in Punjabi in Stratford, Theatre Royal. So that kind of brought me together with a big Sikh group. There was about 40 of us. And then we all started getting married, going our own ways, etc. Then Baji from the theatre group calls me back. We're setting up a Punjabi school. We need teachers. 2003 it was. And I was like, okay, that's giving up Saturday mornings, all right, I'll do it. My wife started helping at the Punjabi school, so it became kind of a family activity. Didn't have kids at the time. So 2003. Then my son was born, so he grew up through the Punjabi school of us dragging him to Punjabi school on Saturday mornings. And what happened to me was basically we had a lot of Punjabi school teachers from India, and I think Punjabi school teachers from India kind of think because they are called teacher that they deserve respect, but you're talking to like East London gangster little kids, who get dumped at Punjabi school and 3 hours later being picked up by their parents who are late because they're doing their shopping at Ilford or wherever. So the majority, that is a disparity. I don't want to say everyone was like that, but really there was 20 parents who would help and about 200. And we had 350 on our roll, right? So Punjabi school ain't just one or two classes with 10 mates. We have our own building with 6 classrooms in it. We've got music room, lecture room. It's basically an old county court now. And first we had our own property, but the only way we could accommodate the kids was churn 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock classes on a Saturday. And the teachers would do as many as they can afford, time allows them, and then swap out with another teacher. And now we have Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday Punjabi schools, after school and weekends. But we had about 350 on the roll. So let's just say being Punjabi, half aren't going to come anyway, right? So about 180. And then out of that 180, splitting them into classes of 15, 20. So what Baji started doing, and I was probably one of the few male teachers, everyone else was madam. And when madam was getting dung from a few naughty kids, they would gather up all the kids, the naughty ones, and give them to me. So I was like the teacher who could speak Essex and tell them,
you can relate to them, innit? Yeah.
That's what I was supposed to be able to relate to them. But every generation moves on, right? So this is the kids who are mobile phones are coming out, their little PlayStation, Game Boy handheld devices being brought to Punjabi school. So the only way I could, and 2.5 hours thing, it's not easy to do all our 80 for 2.5 hours, right? So I started to break all my class up into 20-minute sessions. And I thought, why don't I just do it like school?
Yeah.
We'll do 20 minutes of art, then 20 minutes of music, then 20 minutes of but all Punjabi, all like to do with this. And then that gave me an opportunity to, all this history collection I've got behind me, to start bringing things into the Punjabi school, take a coin in, say to the kids, have a look at the coin. There's an order on there somewhere. Have a look for it, And 20 minutes passes just like that, Then here's a stamp. Here's a newspaper article. Why don't you copy it? 20
That's
minutes
amazing,
passing, right? So we were trying to bring in historical items, but teaching it in Punjabi, and it kind of showed me that the kids do want to learn something, but they just don't want to turn that same J.S. Nagra book, yellow page 16.
Punjabi Made Easy, book one,
all of those, right? Then those kids were starting to grow up with me and didn't want to leave that class because they were getting up in a boring class. And then I started, doing more. Then YouTube started. So on Thursdays, I would be downloading stuff, when Basic started, downloading it, because we didn't have Wi-Fi, so we had to download it to our computer, then get one kid to set up a laptop and a projector, which we borrowed from work, the projector, then we'd be projecting it on the wall, and then I'd just let Jagraj take over or someone else take over my class just by projecting it on a wall, right? And we did that for a long time, and that was like the technology. We got technology in our class, right? So I went up to about 2010, and then by about 2013, it was actually 2010 to 2012, I was upstairs in a Sikhi camp in the Gurdwara Hall, telling them these little histories that I've collected and connected in London. And I realized that these kids don't even know where Fenchurch Street is. So when I'm trying to say Tower of London,
they've got no idea.
They don't even know, because they were like me. They've never stepped out of Newham, right? Or Ilford. So then I switched it into actually just bringing a Monopoly board in and saying Fenchurch Street is next to Tower Bridge. Tower Bridge is where the Kohinoor is. Bond Street is a jeweler's called Cartier, and Cartier made this necklace for the Maharajah of Patiala. And so we made this Monopoly board based on Sikhi, and that used to kill 2 hours easy, just play Monopoly, right? So that's now published, and it's out there called Sikhopoly now instead of Monopoly, because the Singh twins gave me that idea, because I was so worried about bloody getting a lawsuit from Waddington's about, using Monopoly, that I changed all the cards to just be stripes, and all this stuff. And I'm now making the property card set that supplements the real Monopoly board. Nice. So you can just buy the Sikh history cards, because every location on the Monopoly board was one of my visits, and so I used to take these kids there to these sites and tell the stories, then come back 2 hours later, because London, it's just fast train in, take a group there, show them.
Can you buy the Sikhopoly board at the moment?
So everyone else keeps saying, oh, Singh, why don't you make it? Why don't you make it? And I was like, mate, do you know how much bunga that's going to be trying to sell a Sikh version of a Monopoly board to the Sikh community? I said, they don't support Sikh initiatives. I know that, right? I'd be just break my back, and I said, what's the point? Better off, I just make the cards. You can print them, stick them on your own Monopoly cards, and the job done. You don't need little bug man going around. You can just have your car and your camel or whatever it is. But if you land on Whitechapel, here's the Sikh story. If you land on Islington, here's the Sikh story. White or Northumberland Avenue, Vine Street, both. It's all here, And we did that for about 2 years, and then we represented the lecture at Vasaki camp 2 years later after all the research, and the kids kind of enjoyed it because they remember it.
Yeah.
Now these kids are at university now, and they call me back for that lecture because they still remember what they learned for that amazing. 3-4 minutes, because they played Monopoly. So by association, they would retain a lot more information.
Yeah.
And we know educationally that works.
Yeah.
But we're still, putting our kids through a very traditional method of learning Punjabi, and we haven't modernized, So that was what I felt. And then in 2013, another one of your interviews, Rav Singh.
Yep.
So he used to live locally to me here. I didn't know that was him. I just knew Nihang Singh lives at the other corner property. And then I think after about a year of living here, he told me his name's Kamal Roop. Said, that's fine. Didn't think of anything. Then I knew his name's Dr. Kamal Roop.
Yeah.
And I was like, not the Dr. Kamal Roop. And he goes, what do you mean the Dr. Kamal Roop? I said, the one whose books I've got at my home. So he came upstairs and he did a fateh in the Babaji's room. And I said, look, there's your book. He was like, yeah. So then he became a little bit of a mentor, and he said to me, Singh, this is good stuff you're doing. You need to work on it and bring it out of the Punjabi school. And a lot of other people were saying it to me. Basics of Sikhi, Harinder Malay.
Yeah.
He also sat in one of my lectures at Garamsar, and he said, "No, Singh, you need to be doing this at Sikhi camp." It was called Sikh Retreat in those days. I think your dad was at one of them in those days, right? So I was presenting there at Sikh Retreat, and all these little opportunities, just bringing Punjabi school lectures outside of Ilford and presenting at either Sikh Retreat, and Kamal Roop asked me to submit a paper at a conference he was organizing. And, you know, and he helped me, and I said, how do I write this stuff up for an academic audience, you know? And he was then telling me, and he QA'd it and reviewed it, got the opportunity to present there. And it started to, it's a little snowball, but it started to work. And things in my head, you get a lot of moral support from people. You get a lot of moral support, but they haven't turned up on a tour, right? So they tell you, oh, well done, Singh, keep going. And I'm like, I only keep going if people turn up for the bloody tours. If they don't turn up, I might as well retire, you know? And,
true.
You know, so the challenge is always trying to keep people engaged. So there's a lot of edutainment on the tours. It's not boring at all, you know, and it's a lot of group work. But so 2013, we started A Little History of the Sikhs, and it was called Monopoly Sikh History Tours, Garamsar Sikh History Tours. But I had a lawyer look at it, and he said they can't sue you for the word little, you know. And I said, we're only little. We work with little groups. We're not UKPHA. We're not, you know, ASHD. We're none of those. We're just doing tours, taking a group out, making sure they learn something so they remember it. And that's how we started, you know. So, and that's why I like it, you know. So, and the little gives me a way to stay away from people who really want, why aren't you putting this on about Gurpurab? And I'm like, we're only little. We only do the 200 years recent modern day Sikh history. We don't do traditional Guru period, because I said there's lots of good people doing it. Why don't I just tell you where to go if you want that? There's good people. Share UK Charity, do a great stuff. Basics, obviously, you know, Nanak Naam. So go follow them and learn from them. If you want to learn Sikhi, learn there. If you want to learn little bits of Sikh history on the streets of London, I'm your man.
Come here. Yeah, no, definitely. Well, just talking about your website, when I was looking through it, you have a quote kind of front and center of your homepage that reads, "Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter." Now, the reason, there's a number of reasons why that came to my attention. First of all, it's because I remember in my first history lecture at university, this is how the lecture started, with that quote on the board, and the lecturer talking about how
from a Nigerian person.
It's an African proverb or something. Yeah.
It was made prominent by a Nigerian who promoted it in one of his talks.
And the lecturer was basically talking about how, as a historian, you're kind of, one of your responsibilities is writing the story of what is happening and trying to do justice to the narrative you're trying to tell. On top of that, I've had conversations with other people on the podcast where they've just completely outright disagreed with this statement because of whatever reason. And I've always find it interesting, and I love having these podcasts because I get to learn so much and really get inside people's kind of brains. But what is it about this quote that resonates with you? And what do you think it is saying to you?
Yeah. So I think this quote, it was probably brought to my attention probably by ASH, the Anglo-sikh Heritage Trail at the time. They had it plastered on their website. Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And given my 10, 15 years of going through markets and seeing these kind of English books about the Anglo-Sikh wars and the great, you know, Victorians who won these battles, that's what I was thinking. Maybe I'm just reading the history from the victor's side.
Yeah.
These letters, you know, that, you know, the Punjab was like this and the Punjab was like that, or India is like this, and the Gandhi, you know, story being told to us through that eyes, you know. And to say I was probably a collector of Indian stuff in the 90s, because I thought I was Indian, right?
Yeah.
And then I sold off all my Indian stuff to fund my Sikh stuff in the late 90s, you know, before eBay came out, and then kind of used all the money on the early days of eBay. So that kind of struck me. Yeah, I didn't know any Indian or Sikh historians, you know. I only knew, you know, the book Christy Campbell's one came out then around that time, very early.
I'm actually reading that right now, and it's
Maharajah's box.
Yeah, it's an insane book. I'm about halfway through it. My plan is to finish it and get in contact with them, and hopefully
I'll get you in contact with him.
Please, I would.
He's a nice
love.
guy. You know, lives just, well, Peter Bance knows him really well.
Oh God, I'd love to do a podcast with him because I've read the first, I think, 9 or 10 chapters.
Yeah.
Actually, what happened was, I'm sure you have a similar thing, which is every few so a lot of the books behind me, and particularly the shelf kind of they're books that I've started to read, but I haven't finished. So
but you end up being a skim reader, right? You're looking for what you want. Yeah, I know. I do the same.
So I was getting not bored, but I was like, all right, I don't want to kind of dig into any of those again. Let me see if I can order some new books or whatever. And then I was like, instead of buying them for full price off Amazon, let's see if I can get them secondhand. So I thought, all right, let me try online. So I went onto the Oxfam website and I found loads.
All online.
God, I found
I
so
worked
many.
in Brixton, the bookshops there. You've got the Amnesty bookshop in Hammersmith when I worked there. And I have picked up so many books, right? And what you need to do is go to a bookshop near a political centre, because these books get given to MPs for free, and the MPs just give it to their local bookshop, Oxfam and Amnesty.
That's clever.
And you just see so many, and I've picked up so many for 2-3 quid in hardback.
Yeah, right? It's nothing. So I bought I think I bought maybe 10 or 15 different books, all ranging from different subjects, whatever.
But what Oxfam do is they put it on their website. So these books they'll put on their website because they know they can get a better price than their shop.
And it was brilliant. So the Christy Campbell book is one of them, and it arrived. And the thing is I've done a lecture, obviously, a podcast with Peter Bance about the kind of the Sikh royal family, and it got a lot of interaction because Maharaj Duleep Singh holds just like the Kohinoor, I guess, holds a very kind of dividing place in the community, which is either he's a Sikh or he's a Christian. And that's why I found his book so interesting, because Peter's, probably the most best quality book in the 2000s that came out near me was Sovereign, Squire and Rebel. Yeah. And just those 3 phases, Sovereign, Squire and Rebel, it just shows that journey. So he wasn't just a Sikh all his life, wasn't just a Christian. He went through these phases. But even to try and segment him into either one is to take away his humanity, because think about it, you could, just like we were talking earlier, you were saying you don't necessarily feel like you belong when you go to Punjab, but you wouldn't necessarily say you're not Punjabi, like as a categorical sentence, right?
Yeah, but here I always tell people I'm from Punjab.
Exactly. And there's a nuance, I think. And I think one thing I really enjoy with this, especially having these conversations, is we get beyond binaries, we get beyond it's black or white, it's yes or no. And so even with the podcast with Peter Bance, a few people were slightly questioning why I'd called it the Sikh royal family, considering for a lot of intensive purposes Duleep Singh becomes a Christian. And as far as I'm concerned, if he was born to the Sikh empire, again a term that I don't necessarily agree with, who am I then to strip it away from him? And especially,
but then his children kind of reignited their Sikhi, because his daughters wouldn't even speak in English; they spoke in Punjabi to each other, right?
And on top of that, and then again him claiming or trying to reclaim his Sikhi and his kind of empire or his power, so to speak. Yes, you could argue it's a political kind of objective. It's got nothing to do with his religion or his understanding. But reading Christy Campbell's book, again, only halfway through it, I really am finding it difficult to put it down, because I'm actually getting to understand Duleep Singh on a completely different level. You understand how he feels, not just from what's happened to him, but you got to remember he's a child when this happens. So he doesn't have a clue. And when he gets older, you can see that, especially for people like you and I who know what it was like when we were teenagers, you kind of see this rebellious streak in him where he's like, actually, I'm kind of figuring things out. Things are starting to connect. The
environment around him would have been so different, because I've been to some of the addresses he's lived in London, right? And you go into these places and you see, and you just think this is what he was surrounded by,
I had the opportunity to go to the men's. Well, we went to Scotland on a
Castle
staycation. Yeah, Maharaj Duleep Singh's child is buried there. And he stayed there for some time. So we just rock up. We turned up.
Did you bump into anyone there?
So we walked in, and they've got like a guy behind the the desk, the reception or whatever. It's a really small place. There's not actually much to see. But the guy was so nice. So he was telling me things about Maharaj Duleep Singh And I was like, what? Like as in he'd
Have a look
obviously...
at have a look at our Edinburgh video. You'll see how much they know.
Oh, it's crazy. They took so much interest. And then he was talking about how he's working with Peter Bance and all of these other organizations. And I was like, oh, funny you've named these people. I've actually just spoken to him the other day.
Yeah.
But it was just insane to see that, like, or not even insane. For me, I was stood in the like one of the main rooms thinking, all right, so my guy in the middle of the 1800s has essentially lost all his family. He's witnessed. So I think one of the letters in Christy Campbell's book that he shares, Duleep Singh writes to, I can't remember who, but basically Duleep Singh is sharing with how he witnessed one of his relatives shoot the prime minister and how he was an eyewitness to that and how it affected him. And so you're thinking, all right, this 10-year-old or however old he is at the time witnesses all of this murder and mayhem within his own family. He then witnesses his empire, or what he's knows as normal, being destroyed and replaced by essentially a foreign invading force that he, like, for all intensive purposes, he has no idea. And then he's shipped essentially halfway across the world to a foreign land which is freezing cold. Because I was like, that, I don't know why, but that to me was something that kept registering, which is how did he manage not just everything else, but then the weather and everything else that went there, and then a complete culture shift. So he's going from...
And prepared for that by, the Logans, right? For this Christianization process.
Yeah, given a Bible, told that this is what you need to go and study and read. And he does. Like in some of the letters that he writes, he's sharing Bible passages, but he's also sharing lines from the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, which is absolutely, like, it's just astounding to see inside his head.
But I think there's so many more of these characters out there, the Duleep Singh story, yes, it's been put on our kind of on the map, through the work that Peter has done. But when I look at any of the early Sikhs, any of that written correspondence you find, any of these clues, and you kind of see that narrative being retold, coming to a foreign land, the way you adjust and acclimatize, and then, we're at least protected by some laws now. They didn't have those protections in those days. It's the first half of the 20th century,
No, definitely. No. So just coming back then.
Yes, so that's that quote. Was it about the lions? But I think the quote for me, the one that I found when reading a book, is the one that really resonates with me, is the past is always alive if it is remembered. Knowledge has life and power if it is saved from human forgetfulness. And the reason and that's in a book called The Lost Libraries, just on page 181. I was just reading it and I just thought I better write it down, because I felt when I started Little History, we're trying to tell the stories behind these locations. Nowadays, Priya's told me it's called geographical history, the history of geographical sites. And some of the PhD people who come, they say I'm telling social histories when I'm telling the stories of people and their stories associated with it. But I always think London has so much history, and when the Olympics was here, I think every country probably felt they could get their own food, meet their own people, and speak their own language in London. Doesn't matter which of the 180 countries around the world flooded into Stratford. I think you could get an Angola restaurant with an Angola community. You could get Brazilians in Camberwell. You could do anything. So I always think the past is always alive, but we have this kind of way now that we walk around staring at our phone and we don't even look around us. And these buildings and these statues and these plinths and these artifacts, they all talk to you. And they're telling you about your own self, and you can link to them. But because we have a tendency to forget or think it's in the past, we can't actually use that power that we can gain from it. And if you have that knowledge and you have that power, for me, it's only ever opened up opportunities in my working career, because if someone talks to me about a certain thing, then I know I can make it more interesting through something, and then listen to them and explore it. And, in consultancy, you have to build a rapport,
So one question that I've got just out of curiosity is, what is perhaps one of the most kind of obscure or random kind of bits of history within London that connects to the Sikhs? Is there something that's... So I know often on these like history of London pages, there's this image of this like mouse that is like part of the building.
Side of a wall, the smallest statue.
And there's a little bit of cheese and this mouse, and like that's like the obscure history of London. Is there anything kind of as random or as kind of weird, or maybe perhaps not as expected in relation to Sikh history? Or is there anything that you were like, I didn't expect that to be there?
So one of the interesting things for me is when we used to go to Heathrow Airport, we were much younger. We used to go through London. There was no congestion charge at that time. You'd go take a car from the east along the river, right? And when you get to around Chelsea, around Battersea area, there's a kind of a obelisk, you know, at the top. It has a gold circle at the top. So when I used to, as a kid, I remember, if we could spot that obelisk and spot that gold, we're halfway there to the airport. We're past the halfway mark. So however long it took us to get to that obelisk in Chelsea, we're close to the airport now. It's only half an hour left, right? And you know, we had to do a lot of Heathrow runs when we were younger. That was your day out, isn't it? To go and collect a person from the airport. And it was about, I don't know. So I grew up with that memory of driving through London, river on this side, straight road through London, right-hand side, look for the obelisk, you're getting near Heathrow, right? 20 years later, I realised that it's the Jallianwala Memorial to the Battle of Jallianwala in the gardens of the Royal Hospital, Chelsea. And now I have my own board there that tells the Sikh story of that. You know,
that's a cool, that I like the way that story has gone like full circle. That's really cool.
So we were invited to write the Jallianwala story from a balanced or a Sikh perspective, rather than just what the NAM could provide, which is we done this and we done this and we done this, and it was all that. And they said, Rav, this is not what we want to portray here. So why don't you? So I went to Amalpar, and I said, Amalpar, I'm only going to use your book to do it, so you might as well help me do it, right? So I wrote a narrative. We made sure the numbers were correct. We made sure this was correct. He QA'd everything. And then, for 3 years, it's been there now, and the board tells the Sikh story of Thar help with the image. And I just remember that monument from when I was a kid, and you can, but now you've got the congestion charge. So no other kid will have that from East London to Heathrow. You have to go around the A406, right?
No, that is, I like that. I like just the fact that that's gone full circle and you're the same person who's then helped to put the story in. That's
now we've got a restoration grant coming for that monument. They want to restore it to even with the 4 cannons. It's so much opportunity. And all this has come through a relationship, And I keep telling him, I am a nobody, that there are bigger organizations that when you see the kind of money that's going to be put towards this, then it's going to need bigger organizations. Little History ain't going to be able to do anything, right? So, we just about give the donations when we finish the tour, right? But we'll do it, it'll be fine. So
that is brilliant. So I noticed that behind a Little History of the Sikhs, there's a whole team of people, including other guides such as Harkiran Kaur, Ajuni Kaur, along with a team of experts, including Dr. Tejpal Singh. I've had the pleasure to talk to him a little bit about some of the military history side of stuff. Gurpreet Singh Anand, I think he's the individual.
Central Gurdwara.
That's it, yeah, Central Gurdwara. Stephen Baker, and then previous podcast guests, as you mentioned, Amarpal Sidhu, as well as a team of people helping with your resources and media. So how did you go from one, and this is also a kind of a personal question, because I guess in some ways I'm in a similar position where
how are you going to grow?
Yeah, I'm like one person doing my bit, trying to see how far I can take it. But you've kind of gone from that journey to now having a team. So how did that happen? Like, what do these people help you with? And how does that whole group kind of create a Little History of the Sikhs?
So look, with the Little History story, I think it goes in phases, because I had this grounding with the Punjabi school. I know I can control 10, 12 kids, taking them on a tour. I know I can do the school history teacher type project, take them out, bring them back safe, right? So my grounding is there. But actually what I wanted to do and what I enjoy is being out there, learning Sikhi away from books, because books people don't read. They will buy your books, either time pressures or, if you sit and read a book, you quickly find that you say, I haven't got time, but if you start reading a book, very quickly, you've read 70 pages. When you started that thing, people don't realize how quickly you can read. I don't know if I just skim read, but I went through phases when I was young where I'd read a lot of books at the library that I got bored going there because I read them already, So I don't know if it's just the speed of reading, but there's something that I try and do which makes people want to pick up that book behind me on Peter Bance or written. So I don't have any merchandise, nothing that says a Little History of the Sikh, buy my t-shirt, buy my jacket, buy this, no need, right? I have no book. I don't want to sell you book, but actually I want to promote Priya's book, Sukwinder's book, Peter's book, because if people don't buy their books, especially from our own community, when they've worked so hard to produce these quality publications, if we can't grow that audience, if all they're going to have is boxes sitting at home, trying to flog their own books, then when you go to such an active Gurudwara like Dharamsala, which is on our doorstep, why can't we have these promoter champions just sitting in Manchester, Birmingham, London, at least making this accessible? So I thought, look, through Little History, I only want to promote the work of Amarpal Sidhu, because actually his book is technically very good, right? And people are using it as a resource reference, right? So if that's your line and interest, then buy it and read it, and don't be scared of reading a book, A lot of people want me to just give them the website. I said, the website isn't referenced or resource. You can't use this information. Get the book, take a photograph of what you're doing and start doing it properly yourself. I've had that knowledge because of the degree I did, the postgrad, and then the work I do. I just can't go around nicking people's ideas and presenting them as my own, right? And I'm trying to teach the kids that don't look for the easy. There's no Snapchat way of learning this stuff, right? And then when I'm doing the tours, we make them very accessible for families, multi-generational. And I said, your granddad's telling you the history here. He's telling you, you don't need to come on a tour and pay me to tell you. He's telling you the same story, but you've never heard it from your own family, And you're just opening up these channels and you get the feedback and that's what keeps us going, And I think with the team, Harkiran, Junni, we've had other guys join us in the past. They will get there, but they're at a much earlier part of their faith because they haven't had the grounding. So they're just surrounded by me in the background to say, look, give it a go. I'll add in something if I need to, but you've got the notes. Just tell a story, go there, And they will learn public speaking. They will be better at whatever job they do in the corporate world, because of this experience of standing up in front of 20 strangers, getting your voice, heard, and making sure people can think. Now, the experts, they're interesting because these are people who have turned up on tours, come back. Dr. Tej is like my right-hand man now on, military history tours. I don't want to do them anymore without, his attendance. Gurpreet Anand came to a lot of the early tours. He's busy with the Gurudwara, but he'll be back when he retires from the Gurudwara. Stephen, we've done a lot of work in Oxford. We'll be doing a lot of work in France and Belgium. Amarpal, I've got a lot more now that are coming online, but I don't want to just fill it up with loads of photos. These are people who actually attend the tours, which then means that I can step back and just run the tour side of it, the logistics, keeping people comfortable, we have a lot of conversations. And these people add so much depth because they have done the first-hand research. They do know the nuances, whereas I need notes and prep. And I can tell a lot of stories, that's fine. And I've done these tours so many, but Junni and Arkid, and they can start learning from them. And there's others. We've got a lot. My own son can run the tour now. He's been on so many, he can run it, but I don't want to. He's only interested in the tour fees. He only wants the money, he doesn't want to run the tour. My daughter, she can walk around graveyards now and trying to discover graves. She's done plenty of that. So if they want to do this stuff, then they can. There's others from the Gurudwara, kids who turn up, they'll come on 2 or 3 tours. Because, in London, oysters are free. So kids can travel for free. So as long as they can get there, which I say, just meet me at the start point. You don't have to pay if you're a kid, come off it, And just, they get 3 or 4 hours, we finish somewhere to eat and come home, But you need to be proactive a little bit, I'll tell you some funny stories later, but, it's not a Gurdwara trip. We're not going to have langar somewhere or have samosa somewhere. It's an educational trip. And this is what I've always struggled with at the Gurdwara, and people have this expectation that, I'm going to pay for everything because I'm under the Gurdwara. But I know I underwrite the risk on this. So I pick up the tab if it goes wrong. Everyone has to pay their way because that's what you would do if you went to a museum with your family.
Yeah, it makes no difference that it's up and Banda who's doing it.
Yeah. They think it's a Karam Sar Gurdwara trip. But I said, no, bring your and I give them a lot of information when you start so they know so I can then focus on the history. I don't have to focus on what you can wear and what do we need trainers or all this stuff they keep asking me. So, and parking, Amar, that's a big problem. Some people in London never been on the underground. Sikh families, they just want to bring their Mercedes with their disabled badge and just park at the venue. And I'm like, no, but it's a walking tour. But you don't understand, But they go, I've never been on the Bakerloo line. I don't know how to get there. I'm like, it's an arrow, one that way, just turn up.
It's not that difficult. Yeah.
You know?
Millions of people use it. You'll be fine. Don't worry.
Yeah. But then when they do, they enjoy it. I've had people say, I've lived there 27 years. I've never seen Buckingham Palace.
Well, I guess when you're busy with having to
but you
run
kind
your
of
life,
forget what lives they've led. They've come here to work, and that's what they've done.
yeah.
They've worked and they've kept themselves like we did within their boundaries and their local areas. They didn't even realize how easy it is to walk around the palace.
So I was reading that you've got a database of over 100 locations in more than 32 boroughs of London. Now, first of all, that's just impressive, full stop. Secondly, do you mind share, like, obviously you've shared a few as we've been talking, but are there any in particular from that list where you're like, these in particular are worth sharing?
Yeah, so I was saying I've worked as a government consultant now, right? And worked in 23 boroughs. So for example, when I'm in Croydon, I'm going to spend a day there. I'm not going to just go in for the meeting. I'll go in for the meeting, have the meeting, then I'll go into their archives. So I go into Croydon, I go into their archives, meet the archivist and say, right, I'm looking for things to do with Sikh and turban and anything. And the archivists know everything, right? They know so much.
They know the thing inside out.
They know everything. So I said, look, Addiscombe, I understand there was a college here for the East India Company. She goes, yeah, Rav, let me have a look. And they have a look and they say, oh, we've got this photo album. So all the generals who were educated at Addiscombe College in Croydon before they left on the East India Company, because they would have to qualify in Hindi and languages, and they would learn in Croydon. So then they went off to India, they would do, and then if they retired and came back, there's a whole area in Addiscombe named after these generals. So you've got Altham Street, you've got all of them, like 6 roads that are named after these generals. So it's not just Havelock Road in Southall, there's another one in Croydon, right? So I was like, and then they had a cannon from Ranjit Singh as well, brought into Addiscombe, put on display. So you speak to Neil Carlton at the V&A and he goes, Rav, see if you can find me a photo. So I'll go in there, look for these photos. And he goes through all these cannon photos and he goes, they're not from the Punjab wars. And you think, oh no, and he goes, these ones. He goes, the last documented of the Punjab cannon that was supposed to come to Addiscombe was lost en route to Chelmsford. So basically someone's nicked it and put it in their own garden or kept it for themselves. It came to Addiscombe, was being moved to Chelmsford, he said, is the last note. And then it disappeared, But they had a lot of these cannons, and they were worth money, in terms of metal and etc. So that one disappeared. But the 2 cannons that were there, he identified as not being to do with the Sikh wars. And I was just like, okay, that's just Croydon. So then you think, okay, Lewisham can't have any Sikh history, but the docks where the stuff used to come in from, was based, that's why it's called Deptford, the docks used to be there. Tower Hamlet's got a plethora of Sikh history, The interesting thing for me, you spoke to Peter Bantz about the 1930s, artillery passage, all of that. So I focus on the 70s, 80s and 90s. So in the 70s, 80s and 90s, there was a Sikh presence in the East End rag trade that was booming. But then the property prices were booming as well. So a lot of the Sikhs came in, made their money and rented out to the Bengalis. And now it's Bangla Town and all of the rest. But the ownership is still Sikh. But their property prices went so high, they were like, we'll just buy a house in Chigwell and rent it out to the next community that's coming in, So all of that rag trade, if property prices stayed low, they would have stayed there and just worked. Because the property price went so high, they were like, well, now we can buy a house in Chigwell, the rent's coming in, and we'll just keep our Mercedes and Rolls Royces out in Chigwell now. That's what they did. But that 70s, 80s story isn't on Google.
That's amazing. No, it's not even the story. So again, because a lot of these podcasts are almost kind of like a side effect of me trying to trace my own family history. Like my father and my grandma and my chachi turned up to England in 1972. So obviously to understand what the hell was going on in that period, I needed to go and study it. So just understanding what was going on in the 60s and all the anti-race riots, the anti-black riots that were going on in London. And so for argument's sake, when I talk to my grandma, I talk to my dad, talk to my uncles, it's a very emotional conversation to have with them because they went through so much. They turned up with like £5 in their pocket. My grandfather passes away a few years after. My dad's like 15, 16. He's the oldest of 3 brothers. My grandma's working too, just like a lot of diaspora descendants can relate to, like grandma's working 2-3 jobs, manual labor jobs, trying to make ends meet. And then to see kind of what the environment was that they were living in really puts it into kind of perspective, and especially considering like even the laws by the end of the 60s had changed. So but this is actually a bit of a nugget that I only discovered recently. So as far as I was concerned, my grandma and my family had turned up into England as refugees. Yeah, that was just an assumption. However, it turns out they actually worked a loophole. Now, the loophole was this, which is, I think in 1968, when they bring in the Second Legislation Act, it clamps down on the amount of numbers of British citizens that can come from the empire into England. And as a result, you had to file all sorts of paperwork to even get on the list, and there are huge backlogs. So when I'd read this, I went, what my grandma's telling me doesn't make sense, because technically they shouldn't have been able to arrive in England. So I saw it kind of soon after reading this, and I was like, yo, what happened? Who bought you? I was like, all right. And again, trying to talk to the older generation, sometimes it gets lost in translation what you're trying to ask. So I was like, all right, who bought your ticket for you to go from Africa to England? I was like, did you buy it? She was like, no. I was like, who bought it then? And she told me, it was in our family, it was her brother-in-law at the time. So I was like, hold on, he bought you a plane ticket. I was like, but how? Because you would have been a Kenyan national on your passport. You would have been coming from the empire. The British wouldn't let you in. And she was like, no, he bought the ticket from England on her name, a one-way ticket, and they shipped everyone over. Once they were in the country, they then declared refugee status. So I was like, you basically played the system. And she was like, yeah, like we had to. Like how, like otherwise you would have been stuck. You would have been on this huge list of this huge waiting list in order to come over. But I wouldn't have figured any of that out unless I'd had these conversations and kind of figured stuff out. So again, coming back, it's really important digging into these periods, because otherwise it doesn't make sense.
I think people now, I find the groups, people send locations to me, send other stories, but the 100 locations, it's 108 on the date. I've shared the database with people. It's no secret. They're public buildings, and it's what they have, where it's located. And I'll send it to you, the PDF, it's fine. For me, it was all about how do I knit these together? So I was thinking doing, tours, Westminster only, Chelsea only. We have 3 in Chelsea, Westminster. But it's what stories you tell at what location. Some of these are just residential addresses, but things happened here. People lived here. Their story has been hidden, but they're memorialized in other ways. Then there's a plethora of artifacts. I think Aman always says it's scattered around London, and but there's lots of it. And because of these generals that came back, there's a lot of stuff that was funded through India, but then funded through Punjab in that second wave. Because they made their businesses out there. Paintings, there's a lot of paintings, and people don't assume there's a lot of art of Sikhs or arts by Sikh artists, but there's more and more of it now in London. There's always a silent painting I always talk about, that whenever you go to the V&A, you face the throne, it's gold, it's shiny, you take your photos, but you never see what's behind you. And what's behind you, and I've watched this in my own groups. I take a group there, I say, explore the Sikh section, and then I just sit and watch them explore and see, are they actually reading the cards? Are they absorbing the knowledge? Or are they just taking photos, updating their WhatsApp and then moving on? Because that's what, without a tour guide, that's what they do. But, like even in India, chal dekh le hum, come on, let's go home.
Take a photo,
quick photo khich li chalo. But when you're on a tour and you know that you're visiting these places, I'm trying to get them to read the cards themselves. Because the only reason I made the tour was because I read the card. I didn't do anything. I didn't have an enlightening moment that explained all this history. It was made on this date, made of this material, found here, brought here. It tells you. But there's a painting in the V&A. It's called The Lady of Amritsar. And I did a video of this with Sikh Foundation last year. That lady is watching you, doing all of this stuff around the golden throne of Amritsar. And yet no one looks behind and even pays attention to it. It's quite a dark painting, and the way the light works, it's highlighting all the all Indian jewelry she's wearing. She's got the different layers of clothing on, and she's, and it's all Punjabi because it's a lady in Amritsar, but it's spelled with a U, Amritsar.
Yeah,
with
the old spelling, yeah.
And because people don't spot that, they don't even make that link that's, oh, it's Amritsar, is it, And when you say that, then they'll spend more time looking at that painting, and I just find it's just in life nowadays, because it's so fast and paced, we don't pay attention to anything. And then there's some people who pay attention to everything.
Yeah.
And, you know, and even
then nerds like you and I who are paying attention to everything, though, right? Like, as in, it's not your normal person.
Yeah, exactly. And if you then all these places come to life.
Yeah.
You know, we launched a video with Hampton Court Palace yesterday. I think we launched it. But the whole park, how do you think they brought these Indians over for these ceremonies and displays? Where would they house them? But they housed them at Hampton Court Palace, and they had these huge grounds where they were in tents, you know, and this park's still there. Palace still know, the photos are still there, you know. So we had an exhibition last year, which was just bringing that out. And so many people on the London History Forum are saying, we didn't realize that there was even a connection to Sikhs with Hampton Court Palace.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I
like
remember
a 50-year connection. You know?
Yeah, no, definitely. I remember after the Peter Bantz podcast, I cut out like a 1.5-minute section, which was just talking about early Sikh settlers in the East End, in the rag trade, and their relationship.
The 1930s,
and their relationship with the Jews in the area at the time, and how, like you were saying, how now, or how recently in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, Sikhs were essentially setting up the Bengalis for kind of the rag trade. The Jews were helping the Sikhs in the 30s. And I saw someone had shared that clip in, I think it was like London History Facebook group or something. And there was thousands of comments, and they were just all of these. I was actually a little bit apprehensive to read the comments because I was like, oh God, they're all going to be racist and this and that. But actually it was the complete opposite. They were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know Sikhs were prominent in London. I didn't know they did this. I didn't know, oh my God, I really love this. I respect them. And it's just bringing that information out to the forefront, because I think, as you've highlighted throughout, is there are loads of people doing lots of different things, really, really taking it to a brilliant level. Amarpal Sidhu, Priya Atwal, even little history of the Sikhs, UKPHA, like we can go on and on and on and naming these people and organizations. But it's about kind of like pushing and helping and encouraging those whilst doing whatever it is.
But we always thought, you know, because we've had this insular Gurdwara upbringing, we always thought the Gurdwara is the outlet for this stuff. But I can stand in a Gurdwara with a table and people will just walk on by, right? I can be on a table and I'll have lots of conversations, but there's no follow-up, and it's not, I need it. But what I'm saying is that the books need to be sold and read for our community to get stronger. You know, I did think about the work you did before about selling the books on, but I just found that I don't want to, you know, I was really heartwarming to see you had bags full of those books, you know, the ones you said, this is what I'm going to Saturday. And I was like, at least people are buying them, you know, which is good, right? The next challenge is the reviews when they've read them, right? And that would be good, because I think the authors will want that. But for me, I just post it off to some people. If I'm working with them, I post them a book. I've got loads of copies of certain books, right? Because I've just collected them at a cheap price. And that, no, you know, they're on the secondary market. There's no damage to them. They're brand new. They look brand new. And I keep the signed ones for myself.
Yes,
I know that, and then the unsigned ones I can give to kids in the Punjabi school, right? And they don't cost that much. When I was younger, I used to find that kids had every FIFA. So if you've had 27 years of FIFA, you've probably spent $2,000 on those games, right?
Well, I remember whilst I was at university, so I did, as I was saying, I did a history degree, and similar to yourself, I kind of got to university with a certain level of Sikh knowledge or understanding or whatever. And also at that time, I guess, looking back, at the time I didn't quite realize, but looking back, I had the privilege of being around people like my dad, Gumbalaroop, and Jagat.
I listened to that one. That was probably an amazing time, especially the ones who've gone to America and built their careers.
And so I was already open to being more I was more open to being more open, if that makes sense, because a lot of those people that I've named, you sometimes wouldn't necessarily think that they would agree on everything, and it's true, they wouldn't, but being witness to them discussing and debating and getting to a conclusion was something that was just absolutely mind-blowing and brilliant to experience. But it was also something that really helped me then, because when I got into my second year, I had a project which was to take a narrative from popular history and then try and find some truth to that. So I decided, all right, let's look at Ret Maryada and let's look at how Ret Maryada evolves and changes over time. So one thing that I can still remember from the essay is the Mirada, written in the 1930s, says to read your Chope Sahib up to Pori 24 and then to stop, because everything else that comes after that, in their eyes, is praising the divine female energy. Okay. And so I did that, and then I remember trying to get hold of books was the most difficult thing in the world. So Royal Holloway, again, yeah, University of London, but the library itself wasn't really that well equipped to the area that I wanted. Then it basically came down to either buying them for premium prices off Amazon if they had it, or having to buy it from India and then obviously pay the shipping. And then recently, with this kind of reiteration of Ramblings of a Sikh, I realized that I had to, not realize, but I was starting to buy books. And I was like, well, if I'm buying them and I'm interested in them, surely someone else somewhere is just as interested in them. So I was like, all right, let's see what happens. So I started off small, and it's worked, then more and more and more. But I think the biggest issue that the biggest issue that I found within the UK, or at least in the West, is there are very few places where you can go and you can be confident that the books that they're providing to you are half decent. Equally, though, having somewhere that is accessible, and so it's like buying them off from India, you're having to pay probably twice the amount just for the postage. But then you've got places like DTF in Birmingham that don't necessarily have. I think they're built for a different generation. And I don't mean that in any disrespect, but I think...
No, I totally see. That's why when you had the quality productions, everything that, UK PHA have done, and I think it's Gashi House, and now you've got Carlis House, and, the things are happening, the things are moving forward. But that's the books that were more interesting to me, having a hardback, dusty cover from India on a book. Now I realize the value of those books, but at a young age I didn't. At the young age I was like, this is a Gurdwara library book, and it's going to take me ages to read, and people have written bits and pieces all over it from the, and I went to India, I went to Patiala University, I bought back loads of books from there, because they were like 50 rupees, 100 rupees, they were not a lot, and I bought back, and I've read them, and they're actually quite good, right? But it just helps you piece the jigsaw together. That's what helped me, it's just that it's not just black and white. It's not just and the grey area, and the way PhD students have to, work at it and then defend it, their research is interesting. And I probably, do want to study more and more and more of this kind. But I've got my own theories about what I would study, growing out of a little history. But time is just such a, as you get older, time is a pressure, and you get yourself enwrapped in this work. And then you don't do the work that pays the bills.
No, not all. And I think
this one doesn't pay the bills, as you know, right?
And I think, as you were saying earlier about like wanting to push the authors and the people who are doing the work in our community, I think
kudos to them, definitely.
Oh, completely. But I think also, so for argument's sake, even trying to source some of these books is really difficult. So one book, well, not even one, there's a number of books that we stock which are nigh on impossible to find. So there's the Dasam Granth book published by Oxford University Press. Almost like, I don't think I've ever managed to find it within the UK. We've had to reach out internationally.
It was hugely priced on Amazon, I remember.
Like, so like, I think I've seen it on. So a good little anecdote that goes to show how stupid the prices can get. What was the book that Gashi House did?
The first one, Warrior Saints.
Yeah, Warrior Saints. So the first edition. Yeah.
The first one is a rare one. I couldn't afford it when they.
So that first edition, I remember when it first came out, my mum had bought a copy, and we'd gone to a Gatka class, and we'd left it at the back of the room, and by the end of the class, it had disappeared. So ever since then, I've always tried or wanted to try and get another copy of it. So I saw it had come upon on an auction for, I think like reserve price was 60 quid. So I was like,
why don't I just give you one?
Well, yeah, and that. And so I put a bid. I actually shared this with him. I put a bid on it for 60 quid.
Yeah.
By the time I'd come back, it had gone up to £450. And I was like, this is insane. So obviously left it. But it goes to show how stupidly priced.
I'll tell you this other one. They had an exhibition, and I'll send you the images, but you have the 1836 Magasin Picturesque, from France, Paris. And at the time, I think they had the Harmandir Sahib exhibition, and they had it open on the Harmandir Sahib page. And I was like, wow. And it's in a glass box. And I thought, that's a nice book. And I don't know who I asked. And I just asked the question. I just said, is this book available and what do they go at? And someone at the exhibition was trying to make out that it's really, really rare and it's worth a lot of money and they won't tell me how much it's worth. I was like, fine. I'm looking at the page, I'm looking at other pages. So then I started to buy pages of that book, which came up on eBay or some others, right? What they would do, they would get the book and they would cut the pages and charge you a lot more. So that page, that page, that page. So I've paid okay money for those, you know, very embarrassing, but I just needed to have it. I wanted it. You know, now I gift that book to people who visit here. I've got 10 copies of it, right? So, and all because I just go to France and get them. At France, you can get them for like 15 euros, 20 euros, right? Here, they want 600 quid, 500 quid, right? France is, if you just say 1836 Magasin Picturesque, 31st of December, it's a standard item in most libraries and they're all flogging them off anyway. So I think with postage, I can get it for 40 euros. So I would say all you do is learn your languages, switch it around, you know, go French. So I buy them from France in France and I don't mind paying the postage. And I've gifted, I think Sonia Dammi came, Urban Agalli's got one, Kamal Preet last week. I said, take it because you can use it. I know what it means to them. You know, so I said, what do I want with 10 copies of the same book, you know? Equally, you know, like when they had the Khalistan banknotes, they used to be a frenzy in the old days. I just used to buy them from a £5 each in Edinburgh, right? Right? And then I was selling them like online for a good description. People give me £600 for it. And when they get it, they want their money back. I said, mate, I charge you insured post. I said, look, you know what you're getting. You're bidding for it. You're bidding because it turns into a frenzy. And I'm like, it's not worth that money. But you're paying for it because it's only 1 or 2 on eBay.
And they put the worth into it by bidding for it. Yeah.
And then I write the descriptions. And I think my first iPod, my first iPad was paid for by those notes, right? But I've bought 10 of them, you know, I've got 1 left now. So every time I was short on a PC at university, I would just sell one of those notes.
To be fair, it's a similar kind of thing that it's kind of
similar. Try and say to me they didn't receive it. I was like, are you sure?
I've got
your signature, isn't it?
Yeah.
See, take it out with Royal Mail.
It's very, very similar to the same thing here, which is like, so when I started the podcast, I was like, all right, I need to somehow no, I didn't have any of the equipment. And then I was like, God, like buying a microphone, it's a few hundred quid. Buying this is a few hundred quid. Then I was like, all right, maybe I can use the bookshop to then help sustain what we're doing over here. And again, you've got people who are like, well, it didn't turn up. And I'm like, well, here's your tracking code. Go and talk to your postage service or whatever. But then also I thought, I kind of, as we were discussing, there's no like central point. There's no place where you can go, all right, I want to know X, Y, and Z about Sikh history. Give it to me. And I'm not saying that I've created that, but I think I've helped to resolve a problem that I've found.
I mean, unfortunately, I've got a lot of the books already. My go-to place for those books is going to be your website because I know it's supporting you as well. And basically, I believe it's a good thing to do because it's kind of, I've always found that I read this article about economics and within the Jewish community, the money stays within the community and everyone earns off it before it leaves. And when they did the same thing with the Sikh community, it leaves very quickly, right? So I think it's like 10 or 15 times circulated. And I think it was 3 in our community. So we have to learn that stuff because when it leaves our community, then all of that economic benefit is lost as well, you know? So we have to, why can't we support our own publishing houses, our own bookshops, our own, and, you know, Kashi House has started that years ago. I don't think they're ever going to be millionaires off the back of it, but at least they've got their own, you know, structure.
They
right?
started the trend literally, and I think
Carly's house is the same one now with the releasing.
Yeah.
And I'm just saying, you know, you're one to at least sell the books. I just say to people, I try and do as less on computer as I can because I stare at it all week. But if you want to come here and just take them, you can take them, buy them, do whatever you want, you know. But the challenge, I say, if you want to take them, then actually read them. If you're just going to take them to put in front of your TV, then don't take
What's
it.
the point of it, right? Yeah.
You know, because then they want their own little bookshelf for their Zoom call, right?
Well, you can see that's what I do.
I know, I've seen your one evolve. It's quite good. You know,
no, definitely. And I think it's also like one thing that you've brought up a few times, and to be fair, it's kind of a common thread, which is collaboration is key. And I think sometimes I've done podcasts. So for argument's sake, I did a podcast with Anchal Malhotra about her book. And then she was like, would you mind stocking some? And I was like, yeah, of course. Like, why wouldn't I? I'd love to. And I'm helping her. She's helping me.
But I think, you know, for me, because it's a journey that you grow, and collaboration for me at the beginning was just visiting the places. Then I get to know the people. Now, when I haven't even got a big following in any channel, I know that. But that's why I keep saying it's a little. Now, all I wanted to do with social media was to fill a coach. So I thought if I have 500 followers, I can get a 50-seater coach booked up. That was what I wanted, because, in the Punjabi school era, everyone wants to go when it's funded, but no one wants to go when they have to pay a ticket. So I needed to turn those school trips, which were free and funded by the Gurdwara, into family days out that everyone's paid their £15 for the coach. I don't make any profit off it, but if I ever went and bought a Mercedes, I know what everyone could be saying.
Yeah.
So I don't, and I think we're very transparent with our accounts. Everyone gets a set of accounts, and they can see when we do our foreign trips, a lot can go wrong in those trips.
Yes, right? I can imagine.
But we have to have a reserve. And we do then distribute it to the charities that we give the money to at the end, But all year we work on the London tours to build up the fund, And I want it to be sustainable. Gamarup and I had these discussions about payments and not, and he's given a lot of people the same advice. The value would be if you charge for it. If you don't charge for it, they won't treat it with any value. And I've seen that on the tours. I'm going to give you, when we get to it, I'll give you some stories on that.
All right, so are there a couple of places in particular that you visit on your tours that, I guess you've already shared a few kind of not bizarre, but a little bit more interesting kind of places and statues and things that I guess were not a little bit more hidden? So I think the statue of Lawrence in the car park near the Daytimers is quite a cool little nugget.
All the stories are connected like this, because they're in front of your eyes, but you don't see it.
I think that's
I'll
so
tell you
cool.
This story then.
Yeah.
I'll tell you this one. This is my favorite one, right? So you see people who have their quadruple bypass heart attack type people, right? And they're going to end up at the Royal Brompton. Now at the Royal Brompton, there's a line of ward. So when you come out your successful surgery, you're recovering in a ward. And when you look out the window, all you can see is the top of a church spire. And that church spire inspires a lot of people. It either says they were close to meeting God, or they're going to, or they're thankful they're going to change their life now. And that church is called St. Luke's Church in Chelsea. Now, Harjat Bungal had his same operation, same location, same window, same looking out on a church. He describes it, right? You know Harjat?
Yeah.
So when he had his operation, but I've come across Sikhs before that, prominent Sikhs gone in for their bypass surgery at the Brompton. And this church in 2010 January, I was working in Westminster, gave my computer in. They said, I'll come back at 4 o'clock. I was like, mate, what am I supposed to do here till 4 o'clock? His IT desk, 10 o'clock, we need to rebuild it. I was like, what am I supposed to do then, right? So I left Westminster, went walking around London. And I thought, you know what, in the back of my head, there was the Punjab Frontier Force Association at St. Luke's Church. They had a set of accounts that closed in 1999, and Google had their closure accounts online. I had been doing some random Punjab Frontier Force searches, and I understood there was an association, but they were in St. Luke's Church in Chelsea. And I was like, well, I can just walk down there and see what this church is all about then. I walked in, and luckily I met Brian Leathard, who was the lector, there. And he said, so are you with the Gurkhas? I said, no, I'm from the Sikhs. And he said, what are you here to see? I said, the Punjab Chapel. Yeah, and he said to me, the Gurkhas come here quite often. We never had a Sikh. And then they took me downstairs, and there was a crypt downstairs in the old days, a Punjab crypt. So all the battle memorials were kept in a crypt, and next door is the Gurkha crypt. So the Gurkha one is still there, and the Punjab one closed in 1999, the Frontier Force one. So we went down there, and he said, is this of interest? I said, no, the chapel. I want to see the chapel then. And so he came upstairs and he said, what, you mean this? And I said, yeah, this is it. Wow, right? So what's there? And in 2010, there was not a picture of it on Google. I'm guaranteeing you there's nothing there. And then when everyone did their exhibitions in SOAS, I was there, and I was saying to people, look, this chapel is amazing. When you walk in, the main cathedral is before you, straight. On the right-hand side, there's a green bit of carpet. There's 25 chairs. there's battle memorials, there's flags from thing. You can look it up. I think you're looking it up somewhere.
Yeah.
A little history of Sikhs.
I'm just Googling at the moment.
Yeah, and we do tours there, and that kind of connected the Royal Hospital Road to the V&A. And I thought, look, here's my first walking tour, because I've got 4 locations within walking distance. But when you step across, that carpet was donated by Buckingham Palace, and there's a whole story that goes back to 1846 through to 1947. But there's a board that says, in 1846, they started to raise the Punjab Frontier Force, because after the first Anglo-Sikh War, the British had a presence in Punjab, and they needed to protect this frontier with Afghanistan. So they started an irregular force, hodgepodge force, just start recruiting it. Sikhs who coming into 1846, and then in 1849, when they've annexed the Punjab, the frontier force has all of these regiments, from 1 down to 14, I think, across the frontier, and they're protecting the Samanna Ridge area and all that Saragari stuff that happens later on. It's all kind of interlinked. Then what happens in 1947, we've got a new country called Pakistan, right? And that Pakistan doesn't want to be associated with the Indian army. So suddenly you've got all this stuff in the garrison churches, which every regiment have their own garrison church. And that church looked like this chapel that they've created, because what they actually did in 1947 is they packed all the stuff and brought it to Chelsea. They asked the V&A, they asked some other church, and they were all too busy with stuff. And there's 25 chairs there with Sikh carvings on there. There's bishops' chairs, Punjab frontier, there's cushions that you kneel on with Sikh. There's things, glass all over the walls with Sikh. There's the flags, the Punjab 2 regiment. And you walk in, I've done like 20, 30 tours there now. And people, you're sitting on stuff that your great grandparents, I know it's from a church, but the Sikhs would have gone in that church, they would have done something in that church, prayed there, because it was the only probably prayer room going, because it was under the officers. And I've got the history, I've got the association. And then in 1999, at the dawn of the new millennium, they closed the association. They said, we're fading into history, because those elders who came from the Punjab in 1947, because they were kicked out of India, weren't they? So the British officers, and where are they going to go? They're going to go to Chelsea, which is their money, they can afford it. They live locally, their association would meet at the church. They had all their memories and their officers' names in there and everything, and it's still there today. And the interesting thing today is the main chapel doesn't have prayers daily. It's at the Punjab chapel they have their prayers, because there's only a few people attending. So they use the Punjab chapel for world peace prayers every morning at 9. So to me, that's just such an amazing story. And in 2010, since then, we do the memorial service as Sikh community. We do the wreath laying, and the Kunda is there, and our poppy is there, and everything is there, because those people have faith. There's one gentleman left who was running it for 10 years himself. And now we get the young Sikhs to come in and say, look, you are connected. This is one aspect of it. And we go in Remembrance Sunday, and we'll do that there. And to me, it's much better than the Cenotaph or Westminster Abbey or Lord Singh or whatever, because this is real association with Punjab. It's the only garrison church in London and only frontier, army church, and all the rest are outside of London. This is the only one you've got. St. Paul's has got a bit, and it's there, and it's living, and it's breathing, and it's still working in the chairs and the cushions, and everything's still there. So I just thought, if it gets too popular, then I'm going to have a case on my hands. They're going to say, Rav, did you do a tour? Because 3 cushions have gone missing. I keep saying to everyone, just leave it. It's properly documented. I've got CCTV and everything. Don't go and do any anti-Sikh activity in there.
Well, I was just about to say, I was like, you've piqued my interest, because obviously I never knew about this, and I definitely want to find out more and go and see it.
That's one of my personal favorites, because I even spoke to a few people and said, look, do you know it's it? And I think they just imagine a plaque on a wall.
Yeah.
They don't imagine 25 chairs with 3rd Sikh, 2nd Sikh, 5th Sikh. They don't imagine all
No, I wouldn't even expect that to be around, like, as in it just sounds...
You could put a link into my video, because we did a video there last year. I know my tie's bent. Every Sikh keeps telling my tie's bent. But I was wearing a face mask, and I kept going up and down, and my tie got... We're going to have to re-record it at some point. But there was an oath that was taken. And the psychology of Sikhi is quite interesting, because the British understood the psychology.
Yeah.
So you would take your oath for king and country. Okay. But I've got a book there for the Punjab Frontier Force. If you're in the Frontier Force, you would take your oath on the Guru Granth Sahib. They would bring a Guru Granth Sahib to make you take your oath on that, because you might not be loyal to your king, but you will be loyal to your Guru. And they understood that. They made you do that oath separately for Sikh regiments than the other regiments.
So again, I like this anecdote because it reopens the conversation that happens quite a lot these days, which is how can you be allegiant to the Guru, who in all intensive purposes is the King of Kings, and then also be aligned to a temporal king who, for all intensive purposes, colonized and took control of your land.
Yeah, no, for me, I was just thinking, this, when they annexed the Punjab, they started to understand Sikhi. They started, we had lots of books about, the British view on Sikh. That it is totally opposite. I know it's totally opposite from a Sikhi perspective, from our perspective. But what they were doing were trying to get soldiers to fight to their death, to protect the British interests. And the way they could guarantee that was if they asked that soldier from a small village to take an oath on their Guru, because you would die for your Guru, but you may not die for Sergeant Smith, I tell you to do something for king of another country, right? That's the way I'm interpreting it. But finding that oath, seeing the chapel, seeing how that force has so much decoration in history. They had their own crypt in London. All that stuff's with the National Army Museum now. But the chapel still exists. And the Gurkhas there have only got two regiments are Gurkha. All the rest are Sikh. And yet the Gurkhas still visit because it's a connection to Nepal, And we still don't associate that because of, multiple factors. The fact is we're still commemorated in London. Those soldiers are commemorated. The Sikh soldier, the officers is the chapel, but the Sikh regiments are only full of majority Sikhs, although I know there was other battalions, but they were still called the 3rd Sikhs, the 2nd Sikhs. For me, it's a Sikh, but if you talk to Tejpal, he'll tell you that there was Pathans, Muslims. And that's fine. I totally understand that. I just say to him, look, I've got a tough enough job keeping on top of the Sikh history without going into Indian military history. I don't want to get any of that wrong, but for the kids who come on these tours, I just think, look, you did a project at school, about Remembrance Sunday, but look how I can connect it to your own. And then when we talk about the oath, we can connect it to more Sikhi. And then if you want to use that to learn more about Guru Gobind Singh, at least we got a platform, because it'll inspire them to learn, Why did they take that decision? Why couldn't we? But I want to keep it open. I don't want to dictate to them what I want them to think, because I want them to experience and breathe it in, and then come on, do your own learning.
You give them the facts and let them then decide how they want to go with it. You're like, this is what's happened. You can then
I think, emotionally, I went through all that in the early days. Oh, that's bad. I've been through that bit where I used to be emotionally affected. Now, most of the time, I'm worried about slip, trips and falls on my tours. Like some Singh trying to sue me for 2 million or something, I have to put him in a harness,
Carrying around like bubble wrap just to make sure no one falls in it.
I know, after so many insurance rules I have to read out at the beginning, make us sign everything, so... we have to cross at safe crossings only. Don't just walk into the road. It's not East London, But another interesting one is a church. There's a church on the Old Kent Road called the Pembroke College Mission. Now, the Pembroke College is in Cambridge. There is a Pembroke College in Oxford. In Cambridge in the 1800s, they had a student studying theology. That student, because he studied theology, then had to practice that for a year, and he came to the mission. And the mission at that time was how you practice what you learn. You understood Christian theology, and you had to practice that in a poor area of London. And there's no poorer area than the Old Kent Road. Just £2 on the Monopoly board, right? So that gentleman's name was Charles Freer Andrews. Charles Freer Andrews lived at the Pembroke College Mission in the Old Kent Road. And then he decided to venture out and use his missionary skills and go to India. So he went to India in the early 1900s. Then in the 1920s, he was described, and you'll find an article by T. Sher Singh, Sikh Sheikh, called An Eyewitness to Sikh History. So when we had the Guru Ka Bagh Morchas going on in the 1920s, he was eyewitnessing all of this and writing it faithfully in the newspapers back into Britain. And he stayed faithful. And he said these soldiers these Sikhs were soldiers in World War I. They served you in the British Empire. And now that same empire is now beating them with sticks because they're claiming a right to what is rightfully theirs, the garden to the Gurdwara, which was in the hand of the Mahants at the time. And, you know, he's done loads of articles. He was sending them back. You can find these in the British newspaper archive, Manchester, London, everywhere.
I'll be digging them up after this, definitely.
Yeah. And Charles Freer Andrews, you know, for me, he's in the Gandhi film as well. He's everywhere, but the Sikh link to him is always ignored. You know, he's the one who's showing you that the Akalis had taken a non-violent approach of just doing Simran while they were getting beaten by the police. And then, you know, Gandhi saw the impact of that. And then that movement started of non-violent movement was more prominent. We had Jallianwala Bagh at the same time, you know, just 2 years. So all of this stuff makes just that part of the tour, you know, if we go to Southwark and then we can take it just, to me, he was called the greatest humanitarian of the 20th century, and yet we don't even know about him.
So just to clarify then, was he like you know, like how today you'll have like the BBC news correspondent in Afghanistan or wherever?
He was a missionary, but he was a missionary spreading the word of Jesus in India, but he was being used by reporters to give them reports on what's going on.
So he himself wasn't a journalist or a newspaper correspondent.
I think he became that from what he was witnessing, because by 1920, he'd been there 20 years, and he probably got maturer, the Indian movement. Gandhi kind of trusted him as well. But his reports, you know, were going to Australia, Britain, everywhere. So you put Charles Freer Andrews, Fiji, there's places in Delhi, Fiji named after him. But he's an eyewitness to Sikh history because of the Morchas.
So his actual purpose was obviously as a missionary, but his kind of secondary, by default of doing that, then he's also witness to all of this and shares that. Okay.
So he was there in Punjab, in Amritsar, 8 miles away from the Amritsar, witnessing this happening. And the interesting thing is we even have a video of it all happening. You know, it's by ITN copyright, so we don't release it, but ask me nicely, I'll send it to you, but we can't share it online, you know, because of the copyright. I know we're in 2022 now, so we might have extinguished the 100-year the lease. Someone's put that video out on Twitter, and I'll find it for you. But I generally try not to break any legal rules on anything, you know.
Oh, I'm sure I've broken so many like with some of the stuff that I've posted on my Instagram, like
Instagram's fine, but I was just thinking, you know, here and Aman knows about it. It was part of their exhibition, you know, as well. It was an American correspondent that filmed the Guru Ka Bagh Morchas, you know.
I think I remember a picture of him from one of their exhibitions. I don't know whether I'm just imagining it now, but
a picture, they would have had a little clip it. But for me, it's about weaving and connecting all of that history together to say, actually, that connects to Newcastle because he was there. So when I do my Premier League Sikh one, the Newcastle story is freer. When I do my Monopoly one, it's about the church. He was in London at Pembroke College. When you do the Ireland one, you can pick up the history there. And all of these is trying to get people to retain a little bit more information. You know, and that's the way I try and work. But I'm building upon people who, you know, T Shared Singh's article is very, very detailed. He was supposed to be in London in 2008, and I bought a ticket at Trafalgar Square at a church to listen to him, and his flight didn't come in or something didn't happen, and someone just read his notes. So it was a really bad lecture. Someone just read his notes that they emailed him, whereas he would have brought it to life if he was here himself, you know. But in my mind, it was Freer Andrews. There's stamps about him in my collection. There's loads of stuff about him if you just scratch underneath the surface, you know. Imagine an eyewitness to Sikh history of a period when, you know, and he faithfully told that story because he really accused the British of what the hell's going on here, you know. You can't do this.
That is amazing. That is amazing. I just wanted to find out then, what are the plans for A Little History of the Sikhs for 2022? Do you have kind of any big projects or anything in particular coming up? And actually, let's start with that, and then we'll
so 2022 is interesting for me because for 2 years we really haven't actively done any tours. We've done our website, we've done a lot of online tours, Sikh Foundation, we did a series with Loughborough University last year. So it was all about just sitting here and developing that stuff. But I'm back on the scene. We start 4th of March, 13th of March, 2nd of April. Tours will start in London again. But our collaborations have really strengthened during the COVID period. So we've had a collaboration with Historic Royal Palaces. We're going back to them to see what this year's collaboration is. So we have these Sikh soldier silhouettes as part of their World War So we represented the Indian Army through Sikhs in Hampton Court. We had 25 made. I thought it was one because we were designing one. They went and got 25 made. So you had 100 Tommies and 25 Sikhs. So that was a nice collaboration. Royal Hospital Chelsea, we've got quite a few events with them coming on. I've trained all their guides now in Sikh history, so I don't have to go. Even if they're doing, like a Chinese group comes in, they'll explain that cannon is from the Sikh kingdom, Maharajah Singh. It's not a British cannon, which they keep saying, so we know that. We have an Oxford City Centre tour this year, developed that with Stephen. So I think the tours will start, the research, Tower Hamlets, and then it's all about timing the European tours. We want to get Belgium, France on. I've got a Malaga to Madrid. Can you imagine the Sikh history from Malaga all the way up to Madrid? That's a nice thing.
I think I first interacted with yourself when I went on holiday to Malta.
Waheguru, yeah, you did.
And you saw that I was in Malta on Facebook, and you'd commented. Yeah. I can't remember what it was, but you commented.
I told you, visit here, go here.
Unfortunately, I didn't get the chance whilst we were there to do that. But from that point on, I went, all right, he knows a lot, because for someone at that point, I didn't really know too much about Sikh history, but for someone to just go, oh, you're in Malta, go to to know exactly where to go to see this.
Ahmed, the way it works is a lot of people do that to me. They say to me, Rav, I'm just here, anything here? And somewhere along, when you've got a genetic engineering imperial mind, all I'm doing is little data sets, and I'm just keep pulling them together.
You know what? You sound exactly like my older brother. He went to Imperial as well, and again, it's just processing data and making it work.
Literally, it's just processing data, right? So when I know people, I have got a folder full of images of Sikhs from Malta, Sikhs in Malta, 1880s, right? There was 5,500 Indian Army, majority Sikh, brought into Malta because of this, Russia war type scenario, the Great Bear. So what they wanted to do was, if they had Malta as a strategic point, they could get to Turkey, Cyprus, Egypt, wherever war was going to break out. Malta would be the strategic point from which the British Army would operate. And the way they needed men was bring in the Sikhs from India, the Indian Army, right? And they did, and they brought in loads. And there's a town there called Pembroke where 2 Sikhs are buried. I went looking for their burial ground, but it was actually a roundabout. But even the museum has, you can tell they're Sikh, they're not Indian. I can tell they're Sikh, it's the Indian Army. But then the amount of newspapers I've got, because that war would have broken out, but it didn't. But if it did, that was the facilities. And Sikhs stayed in Malta for about 60 years, only till the 19th. They assimilated into with Maltese, and you saw Sikh Maltese children as families were raised. So, and really interesting. So I've been we were supposed to go again in December, but I'm building my links there, and Spanish Sikh history, French, Iceland, when I went up to there, Stockholm, there's Sikh history in Stockholm, East India Papers, and then you got East African rally driver's car, Joginder Singh, that's in the Volvo Museum, sometimes at Stockholm Airport. So it's all different types of histories. And because we're a little history, I don't say I'm just military or I'm just art.
Yes, you can explore, right?
Yeah, and the amount of cannons that, Berlin, Dublin, I know all the UK cannons, but they're all Maharajah Singh's army cannons. They're all given away as trophies to the Prussians, to the Irish, generals, and they're kept and they're preserved and they're in good condition.
What are some of the Sikh history then in Spain? Is it a lot to do with the wars?
Yeah, no, the Spanish Sikh history, the way I tell that one is through Anita Delgado Briones. So Anita Briones Delgado, she was a Spanish dancer. She's called the Spanish Cinderella because she was at the king's wedding, and it was Maharaja Jagatjit Singh, the Francophile ruler of Kapurthala.
The one he's got a copy of the Versailles Palace in Patiala or whatever.
Patiala. Yeah. And also, I'll come on to this because they went at the Cafe Curzon in Madrid, and he spotted this dancer who he thought was very beautiful and teed her up to be his wife, took her to Paris to train her to be a princess of Kapurthala, married her. She took Amrit, became Maharani Prem Kaur, went to honeymoon in Morocco and saw the mosque in Morocco, Katoubia Mosque. So built her a replica for the Muslim citizens in Kapurthala. When she got to Kapurthala, they realized that she was wife number 5, not wife number 1. And then she just went on tours and she wrote a book about my voyages in India. So she did that. Then she came back and then he divorced her. But he divorced her and he had a big row with her in the Savoy Hotel. And there was a lawyer sitting in the corner who watched this and he said, that is disgraceful. I'll make sure you get a good settlement. So rather than being divorced and outcast, she actually got divorced, come back to Spain, live in Madrid, had a child who went to Oxford University, you know, her child went to Oxford, I'm sure it was Oxford, because she had a good settlement. And the person who arranged that settlement for her was none other than Jinnah, who was the lawyer who saw her in the Savoy Hotel with the Maharajah and then arranged that separation.
No way.
All these. So I've done an online tour about that.
That's insane. That's pretty
that
nuts.
is insane. And then when I went to Liverpool versus Tottenham European final 2 years ago, there's the Atletico Madrid stadium. Now my cousin and I, we just wanted to go and he was already there. So I said, I'll fly out and join you. You've already paid for the hotel. We didn't want to get mugged on the tickets. So we watched it in Madrid, fine, had our Liverpool shirt on. But then our flight was 2 days later. Well, what do you do on Sunday? What do you do on Monday? I said, Singh, we're going to go around looking for a grave. So we went into the Concerto del Giusto, I think it is, a cemetery del Giusto. I thought because she was prominent, I'll go straight to the mayor's and, you know, go up to that section and see, because she's royal, right? They must know she's royal. You know, went all the way, we spent 2 hours dusting leaves off the central section, checking every grave. Where is this Maharani Prem Kaur of Kapurthala, Anita Delgado? After about 4 hours, we didn't get very far. We kind of dejected walking down, and we just walking down this cemetery on a hill. And we got to P4. The photo's not great. I had one Google photo, but I said, look, at the bottom of the thing, there's a cross. So there must be a cross that goes up. So we don't have to check all the graves. We just have to check the ones with the cross, you know? So we thought, and then we found it. We found her grave, dusted it all off, cleaned it up, took a lot of photos. It had a sword of Kapurthala on it, and it says, your son doesn't forget. So that way I thought, okay, now I've got Malaga, I've got the paintings, I've got the Curzon, I've got the palace where the wedding was, I've got the photos, the paintings, and then we've got her death. So we can tell all her life story through a tour. And then people can just go and watch football at Real Madrid if they want.
Yeah.
You know, so we've got a tour and it's Malaga, you land in Malaga, you finish in Madrid, we've done the tour, but it's a smaller group one. So I don't think there's any country in Europe that I can't find you Sikh history. Switzerland, we've got it. I went to Lake Garda, we can find Sikh history there, you know. So I just say, carry on going to Europe, just touch in before you go and I'll tell you.
Yeah, no, definitely.
We just did Sikh history in San Marino when the England played there. So there was England footballers club. A friend of mine, KD Singh, went out there. So I just gave him 10 pages. It's in Italy, but it's not far, you know. So he saw all the graves. He took me high-res photos for our website, published a guide now you'll find on our internet. So if England plays San Marino again,
that content will be coming out. No, definitely.
that would come handy.
Yeah,
you know?
No, definitely.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I just want to say for a COVID thing is we've set up this space now. This is a 63 square meter space behind me, and you can see one corner of it. It has a lot of art. So we have Singh Twins, Inquisitive art by Rupi, Urban Agali, it's all here. We've had some visitors now. We've had Sonia Thammi, Kamal Preet, Bhupinder Bhasin. We've had a few come, but I see this as a research space. You've got everything that you've got in the British Museum, the Museum of London, Victoria. I've got everything here so you can see it all. The coins from the British Museum are behind. There's artifacts. All the books you'd ever want in a library, probably similar to yours, I have a copy of. So we've had visitors come, researchers, you know, they can use this space. Because I think for me, I thought I was in with the Gurdwara before, you know. So, and I've had lots of Gurdwara Pradhans come and to my house. This was all in a Babaji's room before. My Babaji's room was much smaller, but just full of books, and then our prayer area, right? And then a lot of this stuff was in the loft. And then pre-COVID, about a year before COVID, I put the planning permission in, and I said, rather than build a house in our garden and sell it off and retire, I'll build what I want to build. And my wife's happy because all this stuff's outside of the house now. You know, I can just go back here, and I've spent 2 years in COVID here.
Yeah,
you know?
It must have been a wonderful little space to have during COVID.
Yeah, pick up a book whenever you want to do work or little history. And I do see it as a space to use for our community, you know. It's accessible from its own access from the side, you know, it doesn't need to come through the house. It's got everything we need. So, and I just want people to use it as a base. the gurdwaras, the local schools, they all offered it, but they all go quiet when it gets hard work, you know. And they all go hide. When I just asked for a lock on the door and a CCTV, and I'm still waiting 12 years for my local gurdwara to sort that out. So I just built it myself, and I just thought, yeah. So now they're coming here and they're saying, oh, you can put it at the gurdwara. I said, what am I supposed to put in here now? And the visitors who come now, it's much more. I learn a lot from them because they're looking at the stuff, they're putting their own views on the stuff I've got. We're dusting off books that I probably haven't touched for a year or two, you know, or 10 years. And it's good. I enjoy it. And I just say to people, you've got a desk, you've got a chair, Wi-Fi's here. So that's what it is. It's a little history museum. And people can just use it to try and move forward with things, you know.
No, definitely. But could you explain the tours that you do in Europe at the moment, and then also the tours that you do in London?
So what we have is we have about 8 to 10 different walking tours in London, and they're our like bread and butter. I can put those on every 2 weeks, and every midweek anyone asks me, I'm in London anyway, and I'll just run a walking tour. So when I run the tour, I'm looking for 20, 25 people to attend. Then a Junni Harkiran can support it. We have our media, Simran can come in, Urban Akali can come in, and then if it's a certain theme, then the experts join us. That's given. And we do an International Women's Day tour as well. You can imagine that the Sikh women's story is memorialised in London. There's locations, there's little bits and pieces, there's photos in squares, and you would never even thought of that. Never ever have thought that. You know, we have just a pure tour, and I have to break it into two now because there's so much that I've gathered, you know. Sikh women's history, military history, about 3 tours, Chelsea, Westminster, 2 different tours. So London is pretty much active and ready to go. Just started with the Tower Hamlets East End tour because these things are now researched, so we can do that. And then our UK tours are generally Brighton, Kent is an interesting tour, and then Oxford. So we'll go around the UK, but like a day trip, and Isle of Wight comes under that one as well. We sometimes have to fit that into a weekend, you know. And then our European ones, so we have 3 to 4 hours, which is a walking tour, 1 day, which will be our day trip ones, enough for a day, and then our weekend ones are around Europe. So you get into Paris, you get into Marseille or Monaco, you get into Malaga, Malta I haven't done yet, but or Northern, you know, and basically with those, I just say to people, the tour bits are these parts, the rest of it, these are your options. You go into these markets, go and eat here, do your own thing with your families. But for 3 hours on the Sunday or 2 hours on the Saturday, we're going to do this bit, and I'll blend it in with a kind of a weekend break, or they can do. And I've learned that it can't just be history all the time, you know. They get to know people, they want to, you know, and even on the UK stuff, we do that as well, you know. So just mix it in and just make it something memorable that they'll remember. You know, and in the London ones, leave them somewhere where they can spend their money, you know, because they're all kind of itching to do things. So I say, look, you're near wherever you want to go now. It's finished at 2 o'clock. You can go, you know. So we kept them 3 hours. I used to do mega tours like 5-6 hours, but people worried that, you know, they take a day to recover. And I was like, mate, it's not that much walking. But you do learn in the tours that there's a funny thing is cars. Punjabis are not really good at walking. I've understood that now. So the pace really drops the walk, you know. So walking, food, we do no free food, no food like that. I say bring your own. And some people bring for 20, and I'm like, I didn't ask you to bring a langar for everyone, you know. Just you know, because you know you from the Gurdwara. You just want to be nice. And they just said, oh, I bought this for everyone. I was like, they should have their own. I'm just really conscious of the allergy situation and people, so I just say to people, look, make your own arrangements. But if we go anywhere, then at least you're catered for in the right way. I'd hate for anything like that to happen on my tour. But it's a risk that, you know, people in Gurdwaras manage because they probably don't have langar if they've got dairy allergy because of butter. You know, I just don't think those spaces work in that way, you know. But on a tour, I have to make sure that, you know, we can just finish at a Pret or a Costa and they know what they can have, which is labelled up, you know. And then on our European tours, it's about finding the vegan restaurants, finding the vegetarian, because even in France, Belgium, I've done all the research to make them Amritari friendly. So no Amritari on my tour should have a problem, right? So I know all the vegan restaurants on near my tour. So then you don't even have to worry, you know. And there's not even milk in it. Don't worry about it. It's the income, you know. And I'm really conscious of that because I know other people run tour groups. but I can't have alcohol anywhere near my stuff because we're not going there to top up on duty free. This is I am associated with a Gurdwara, I know that, so I can't risk it, and I've always said it's Amritari friendly. And for those people, I just say, well, try just going vegetarian for a day. It's all right. You can survive. It'll be all right.
It's not that hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
You don't have to eat snails or anything.
Oh God, no. All frogs' legs for that matter. Yeah. What is your advice for those wanting to get into a similar space? Like, I know for yourself, it kind of naturally evolved over time and things went from kind of one to the other and so on. But in terms of trying to get into this space, whether that is researching or finding artifacts that are all over the place, or even doing tours or whatever, like, what would you say, or what advice would you give?
I've given this a little bit of thought because I want people to do this. I am not a brand that wants to keep this for myself. There is no money in it, right? So the first thing you got to do is enjoy what you do. If you like telling stories, if you like reading, if you want to bring out those stories and help the next generation, then this kind of, if you go to Oxford University, a lot of students run tours on the Saturday. And they're just reading textbook stuff and they're going around pointing out at colleges and they've got groups following them around. And you know what? It's good money for them, great. The difference for us is it helps, rather than when I was younger, I think the lectures were done by non-Sikhs, I attended, he's a specialist. I think Peter Bance was the first one to break that for me. And even then, most people think Peter Bance is white.
Yeah, no, they do. When I see his name, I'm like, I think I first saw his name in a print book and I went, Peter Bance talking about Sikhi, what's this? Yeah. And then I saw him this was way back in 2011 or 12. There was a BBC documentary about, it must have been something to do with like Maharaj Duleep Singh or something. And he was on that and it was Peter Bance. And I was like, how is this Singh called Peter?
Yeah, he's explained that now, so that's all right. But I didn't, when I was younger, I didn't have, because you're East London or whatever, you don't have the confidence to approach these people, right? So Amandeep Madra, of course I know who he was. I've seen his work, I've bought his books. I wouldn't go up to him and have a conversation, right? I've never had a conversation with him. Devinder Toor was the same, because they're busy people when they're working on these events. But then some people have helped me along the way. Kamal Roop definitely one. Elizabeth Weigler watched a lot of our tours and helped. She's in California, Dr. Nirvikar Singh. But what I say to young people is, someone said to me that start small and go. If you're quality, they will come to you, And rather than, when I was doing these tours at Karamsar with the Punjabi school, I thought I needed ASHT or UKPHA above me to guarantee the people coming, right? That's what I thought. So I've reached out to them, I emailed them. I didn't get a response from any of them for years, right? Which was fine, because they're busy people themselves, you understand now, right? And a lot of the people who give me moral support have never attended a tour. And I don't want moral support. I said, I'm confident enough to do a tour. What I want is people to come on the tour and then help me develop it or understand it. So any young person out there, I said, one, enjoy what you do, because then it's just like going to football or doing whatever. You're going to enjoy it, you're going to get satisfaction from it. I like watching people learn, simple, right? Then I think with the recent, BLM stuff and everything going on, museum spaces are looking to reinterpret their collections. If you have something to offer, then start volunteering. The volunteering will open up opportunities. I now get asked, what is your fee? I was like, Flavor Deck 10 years ago. So if someone said to me, what is your fee? I would be desperate for it. Now I don't need the fee because of my work. So I say, what can you afford, or how does it work with other people? But for a young person, you have to be a specialist. Don't be a generalist on anything, be specialist. And then, all these opportunities will start opening up for you. And I don't even know what I'm a specialist in. I think it's just geographical history. You could take me around London and I could tell you the London history, then the Sikh history, then the Indian history, and the Fijian history. But I've grown up reading that history. Peter Ackroyd's The History of London. You just have to read it, and then all these spaces come alive. But I've worked there as well. I've been to their archives. For me, they're all just stories. But for young people, I just think there's so much opportunity out there if you've got this kind of degree. But find a space and make it your own. At the moment, I don't think I've come across any other organized Sikh history tour group, right? And I think if someone wants to reach out and say, I want to do it, I will help you. I'll give you the stuff you need to do it. But you have to learn the hard knocks of life as well. Punjabi community is really hard to work with because, and I think the reason is they think, it's only 10, 11, 12, 13 pounds I charge. And the only reason I charge them is because I want you to commit to it. And then I can give a donation to the people who've given the access, because they need money to survive. Churches aren't free. Museum collections, need money. And we just reset, and those open up opportunities. But for a young person, if you said to me, I want to work in Sainsbury's or I want to run tours in the summer season, I'd say do tours in the summer season. You'll definitely make 70, 80 pound a day and for 3 hours, and you'll enjoy yourself and you'll be learning, do it, just do it and start. You can do it with your friends first, £5 each or whatever, and see what goes. But that's how I did it. But I had that Punjabi school audience, to do that. London is easy because of Oyster travel. I don't know what it's like outside, London, but all of the museums, I think now they would welcome you. Write professionally to these places, await a response, and keep that communication channel open. I now get lots of emails that I was kind of yearning for 10 years ago. Now it's like, what do you think? Can you help us with this? Which is fantastic. For me, it's really nice. And that's a long journey. But for a young person now to do it, I think it'll be an easier journey now because the archives are there. They want you to volunteer. They want you to interpret. And then, you know what? You'll be curating this stuff because they'll want to, once they understand it, they'll bring it forward.
And there's also, just personally speaking, there are vast quantities of information.
I see your
online.
stuff regularly and I'm like, wow, some of it I've already got and I'm like, I haven't even put it out yet, and that's fine. But I've got sections of the website I want to develop and do, but it is hard work. How much time back office takes,
Oh God.
Phenomenal amount, right? And I know you can edit this as well. So.
Just even the reading and the research of putting just a bit of text together is long enough. But then doing tours, doing things like this, it takes time. Just
and people did say to me, like, my mum always says to me, "Hun kar liya, hun bas kar." They think I do the tour once, kar liya, hun fir kyun karna, right? But they don't understand that for some people in England, that's their job, doing tour guides, and they make good money out of it, and they can pay their bills with it, and that's good. And Stephen Barker does that, and he can have a life doing it, and he's a retired teacher, or retired. So I think there's options there, but I think for young people is find your space. I can think of so many different tours that people could do. Imagine, you could even do, I reckon, I'm just thinking of, like the young audience now, they go into Bhangra music so quickly, right? And that's the way they learn Punjabi. And every university I go to, it's all about, Tuesday night, whatever they do. But if you did a, what was Bhangra like in the 80s and just did a tour of the venues that people used to go to, it would bring out so many stories,
I reckon, especially now with the re-emergence of the daytimers, I think if you did a daytimers walking tour of
Hippodrome, Ministry of Sound, whatever, just
you'd kill it. Because I think one thing that you've brought up, or one thing that I've picked up on from the work you're doing, and I guess similarly with UKPHA, Peter Bance, and all of these other organizations and individuals, is that they just bringing, and I say our history in like a very open collective term, but they're bringing our history to the forefront. And as soon as it's there, people do take to it. And I think that's right. Like, as in, if you did a walking tour of the Punjabi music scene in the 80s, people would take to it because it's our history.
Yeah, it's our history. And, we grow and people evolve. And I think, like, when I ran my tours in the early days, we only had 9 on a tour. And then on the morning, 4 would drop out, so I'm down to 5. So then things have got better for us in terms of numbers. But I do, if people listen to this, I do want them to appreciate that you have to be professional. Just being organized and professional will get you halfway where you want to be in life, right? So that means respond back. If you're going to book a ticket, then book the ticket and commit to it. That means, there was once I had 3 generations of an intergenerational tour, but they said my baby's in a wheelchair. I said, you know what? I want your Bibi to come. I'll do a step-free itinerary. Everywhere's going to be step-free. So instead of Sloane Street Station, it's going to be Victoria. Then from there, we're going to do step-free, the church and the museum step-free. But your youngest and the mum and the Bibi, you can all come together. And you know what? I'll make it a good day, but you're going to be part of the tour. So I've changed the whole tour around. I've done everything. Everyone else has turned up. And on the morning, they text back, oh, we forgot we've got tuition today. Right? So I was just like, so I can't take these kind of requests anymore because, I've had other people, I get a lot of inquiries, work with this group. So I've learned to play tennis. So I say, okay, you said to me you want a tour. I need this from you. So I put the ball back in their court on Gmail. So when you give me this, I'll proceed to base 2, and then you don't hear of them again. I just need a date. Can you give me a date that you can commit 10 people to come? And then that doesn't happen. Then I have another one where I worked with another organization and they critical, it must be done for their funding. We need a walking tour done in March, March is not a good month to be doing walking tours when it's snowing, right? So I said, look, I'll do it. I put it all on, but I said, just to be safe, I'll move it into the mainstream space. I'll put it on my Facebook. So when you organize your 15 people to come, then I'll add in my 10 or 12. So 3 months we've been organizing this tour, right? The date has been booked for 3 months. A week before, oh, sorry, I'm in Croatia on holiday. I'm like,
you're not helping anyone.
So what I feel is I've learned what it's like for a small business. Small businesses must get knocked left, right, and center all the time. And this, because I've tried to professionalize it, and people might assume it's a business. A lot of people think I do this full time. I'm like, mate, you think running tours me full time?
Yeah.
I've got bills to pay, man.
Yeah, I've got a life to look after.
Yeah, your £13 ain't going to pay my electricity bill next month,
Yeah.
So, but the good thing is, so I've just learnt this stuff, and you learn what the rules of engagement are. And I've just learnt to play this way, to say to people, I'll listen. I can listen to your histories, but you've got to realize my one is fact checked. Your granddad story from the Pind is not fact checked. The amount of Udham Singh stories I get on my tours, everyone's met Udham Singh.
I remember he came up on Udham Singh came up in the Peter Bantz podcast, obviously because of his history in England, and he said the same thing. He goes, everyone and their dog has a story about Udham Singh, but obviously with people like yourself and Peter Bantz, they verified and fact checked some of these stories. So he was sharing.
When I did a tour for Sikhi, Harinder Singh Sikhi came, and I said, Baji, look, do whatever you want, and he wanted the Udham Singh experience, So yes, first night, Brixton Prison, hanged at Pentonville Prison, Caxton Hall, Mornington Crescent, Artillery Passage. These are verified. Not, like Barking, all these other areas where someone's granddad said he came there. I said, yeah, but just give me a date when. And they're saying like 1943. I said he was hanged in 1940.
He's dead. Yeah.
So then there was all these, like Irish Sikh connections from East London, West. I said, I totally understand all of this and it's fine, but I can't run a tour based on stories someone told you, But he was interested. And I thought since that Amazon film came out, the Udham Singh tour could work, but it's just so scattered around London. It's just not easy to do. So I have to weave it into different parts. For me, when I watched it, I just thought the amount of time about the Jallianwala Bagh was the emotional thing. That's why people remembered that. They thought it was good because they spent nearly a full hour on it. Whereas in Gandhi and every other film is 20 seconds or 30 seconds.
But I even remember asking Amandeep Madra about whether Udham Singh had any connection to do with Jallianwala Bagh.
It's mixed sources,
And he's pretty much like, from the sources that I can see, Udham Singh is in East Africa at the point of Jallianwala Bagh happens. And I'm like, well, if that is verified, that just.
But the problem, with anything to do with Udham Singh, it's so many aliases, so many names, so many different. It's hard to work in that way. But I think when I was in America, the short part of Sikh, his presence in America is interesting to them because they don't have this deep, rich history in America. They keep coming out with it now with Spurned and a few other things going on. But nothing like what the UK has in terms of artifacts and anything. So, you know, he was there for a small period, wasn't he? And then then he may have raised 2 children there with some, and, you know, that lineage may have continued. And I do sometimes, you know, on my tours, I want people to come to learn something new, not to reinforce their own thing about everything, you know. So I'll show you things that for the first time you won't have even acknowledged, you know, or even knew of. And that's what I'd like the children or kids to come to start to evolve, you know. If I wanted to do Kohinoor and Uddham Singh type stuff, I'll just walk around Caxton Hall and go to Tower Hill, and that's it, you know. But there's 80 other places, each with a different story, you know. I can do you a legal activism tour in London, you know, with the judges, the Inns of Court, Khushwant Singh, Morcha Singh, Parliament Square, and all of the legal stuff we've overcome through acts of parliament, Sikhs. That's an interesting talk, because these are spaces in London that memorialize this, you know, there are spaces, but that's quite a specialized one. I'm talking to a group about trying to do something like that for them. But it's just connecting those little data sets, like you said, like your brother does, you know, and it's just trying to stick to facts and not be controversial. I kind of wanted to ask you this, that, you know, controversy will probably get you double the hits, right? You know, but I don't want to create controversy. I don't want to have statements about, you know, this happened and that happened and it's black and white. I just want to use it as an educational platform to say to people, come, start spending less time on your phone and more time in a book, and just start your own journey. You know, there's no point in us having publishing houses if we can't even support our own ones, you know.
Definitely.
You know?
Definitely.
You know?
I think just on the controversy thing, I think one thing with,
you might get it all the time. You've had so many different guests. I just can't imagine the amount of stuff you deal with. But and you're on every platform.
Well, it's interesting. So, like, personally speaking, and I'm sure you can relate to a lot of this, because one of the objectives of the podcast was to take some of these controversies and try to be very transparent and just brutally honest with it. So I'm assuming you've listened to, well, you have listened to the Kamalpreet Pradesi one. Like, that itself, I was really actually quite scared and apprehensive to do that podcast, because I was like, everyone's going to come at me with your RSS, you think Sikhs are Hindus, this, that, the other, the usual kind of stupid controversies. But in actuality, most people at the end of it, and most of the comments and feedback I got on it was like, wow, I didn't know those connections. Thank you for doing that. And to be honest, it was I'm almost trying to do something I wish I had when I was doing my research and my university degree, which is to create a bank of knowledge that is easily accessible, but goes into those nitty-gritty details and really tries to figure out what's going on. I'm not saying what the conclusions we come to or what we say is 1000% correct, and you should just accept what I've got to say. Take it, work on it, come back and give me something to work with. But it's almost like, so the Dasam Granth podcast on authenticity and authorship, that debate has been raging for at least 2 decades, at least. And so to just I guess in some ways I want to package controversy and bottle it. And what I mean by that is I don't want to sell it to you, but what I want to do is just get it out of the way, because I don't want every time I post something about Dasam Granth, someone to be in the comments going, this isn't the work of Guru Gobind Singh Ji. I actually want them to listen.
I find with the work that Little History does, we get a lot of, because it says history and because it says Sikh, right? I was told before not to use Sikhs, just call it a little history of the Punjab and you could be more mainstream. And I was like, no, but I specialize in Sikh history. I've been through my Indian phase. I've been, now I would say I'm Punjabi, but at the time I felt I was Sikh when I started Little History of the Sikhs. I teach in a Punjabi school, Punjabi and Sikh, right? I don't teach anything else. So now I wish I did call it a Little History of the Punjab, because every Gurpurab or every function, I get so many Kirtan videos sent to me, but you put this on your website, and I'm like, we don't specialize in good morning WhatsApp messages, and I do get, and I just try and delete them off or block them off, and I say, I'm not trying to be rude, but all I'm trying to say is, if you want a history of the Sikhs, there's about 200 other Facebook websites that can give you that, where Little Histories, modern day Sikh history, exploring UK, London and Europe. You're not going to find that Guru Nanak came to London, UK or Europe. So I can't put those images up, that I get sent. And I don't get a lot of it because I'm not that mainstream, but I find anytime I do get anything, I get lots of from India. And I said, you're never going to come on a tour. And then I keep getting messages about help, like help. I know, did you get those yet? Help messages?
I get loads of I get such. So just a random one to share with you. This actually happened yesterday. Yeah. So no, not yesterday. Today's what? Today's Sunday. So it happened on Friday. So basically, I checked. Just wanted to see what's going on. So I checked Instagram, and someone had messaged me, and they had sent me a link. I can't remember what the website was now, but they sent me a link, and basically he was like, "Oh, have you seen this? This page is claiming that Guru Nanak Dev Ji came to America and visited these places." And I'm pissing myself when I read this. Like, I'm absolutely in it. I'm just laughing, yeah. And I replied back to them, I'm like, look, I'm not going to waste my time reading it because I'm pretty sure that most of that is just waffle. End of story. Anyway, yesterday then I get another message off him and he's like, nah, look, you should read it because you're expert in Sikh history and the dates match and the times match and the evidence that he's given really makes sense. And I'm like, look, first thing, I'm no expert. I'm just some nerd who reads books and shares what he finds. Yeah. Secondly, I'm not bothered how much you think those jigsaw pieces fit. There is no way in categorical history that ever happened. And if it did, it's not in any of the original Janam Sakhis. So I'm happy not to take it as gospel. And then, after that, I was just like, throughout the day, I just kept thinking, like, is that where mainstream popular Sikh history is at, where we're now trying to create
everything
theories?
New.
Yeah, we're trying to create theories that for whatever reason we think are going to attract attention, or or even the example we were talking about right at the start, which was like rewriting history. So I find it interesting when I shared kind of a short history of the Kohinoor and about how Maharaj Singh Ji wanted to gift it to Jagannath Puri. That just creates a storm. Everyone's like, no, he didn't want that. You're lying. Bumans wrote it. It's wrong. And I'm like, well, I can provide you with at least a dozen primary sources from not just his chronicler, but the British, from other people in his camp, from other Europeans who all pretty much say the same thing. So what, are you trying to now tell me that they're all in on some conspiracy to rid us of the Kohinoor?
It's not even, so again, it's just very emotional, isn't it, when they get tired. But I find for me, with a little history, one of the kind of the cards that I can usually play is, we're only little. We're only doing the little stuff. I think the chote bande ya kisi kari jao jo kanda, right? And I don't try and disagree and agree, but I just kind of say to people, just continue a path of learning. For me, my path of learning is still focused on the Guru Granth Sahib. That's, for me, we're still learning the vichar on that, and learning from some quite knowledgeable people around our Sangat, and the depth of learning that they take it to kind of just makes it even more kind of understanding Shabad. And these are the same Shabad we've grown up with, but as you grow older, they start to reflect in a different way, right? Yeah, and you can start relating to them more. So there's never going to be a point where just because you've done one Akhand Path yourself that you know what it all means. No way, And that's what I say to people. It's just ultimately a little history should help you with your own Sikhi learning, and that can be a lonely place for people because it's a personal journey. So these tours or this community that we try and build, I don't promote it, I don't say it, but I know it works because of my roots in Punjabi school, that kids are going to need to rely on the Guru at some point in their life, and if they can do that. And for people like me, there's a whole background about why I feel I need to connect to Guru, which is probably a whole different, thing. But just to share quietly, like, I was diagnosed as a 8-year-old type 1 diabetic in the 80s, So I spent ages in hospital. I was closer to God than anyone else that I knew because I used to have to mix pig and cow insulin in certain ratios in a syringe needle and inject it myself because my parents couldn't really understand what the doctor was saying about all this stuff. Then the human trials, then the Nova rapid jabs that come out. I was part of all of that process. But the interesting thing for me is that I've always found Sikhi as a source of strength, because your own mortality is you're so much more aware of your own mortality, having 3 or 4 injections a day, knowing that hypos can lead you into hospital and all that kind of stuff. And touch wood, I've had it, 35 years plus now, 37 years, right? My eyes are okay, kidneys are okay, body's still functioning, still can walk, right? Which, at that time, 25 years was a good innings, They used to give you a gold medal, so I live with something that gives you a really much, why do you want to piss people off, when tomorrow no one knows what happened. So really, is this the most important thing we need to be having a fight about when, and I don't want to get into all of that, because for me, every day is still a blessing, right? So why do you want to be on negative energy when it can be on the positive side? So I do feel the force of Barney around you, because my grandmother kind of installed it in us, and it is a protector, and I've seen, I think I'm a living, breathing example of that, of that Nidnem Rehet type situation. Not that I can manage it every day, but if you do, you can have a better day, right? And at the end of the day, who knows what comes tomorrow, right? So that's why I try and stay away from these controversial things. I say, Hatha, if that's what floats your boat, then carry on. But me, I just need to focus on my next injection and staying alive.
But I think that's just a beautiful way of putting it. And equally, I think that's a good way of dealing with it, which is I'm just happy to agree to disagree. Like you're just as correct. What I've got to say is absolutely fine as well, and we can still continue to move on. And I think that's
what happens in the tours is, these WhatsApp groups, because we spent 3 hours in a professional capacity learning. These groups have got different types of Sikhs on them. It's a very good audience for bringing people together and learning from each other, because you can just mix who you walk with for the next part of the tour, And I find we need to be doing more of them if it works. Into Sikh harmony might build, in three hours of just walking together with someone and learning something, maybe.
Well, I think that's probably a really beautiful place to probably wrap this podcast up. We've been talking for now just over 3 hours. It's absolutely flown by. I can say, I'm happy to sit and continue.
No,
I love
good.
it, right?
We're good,
but I think we should definitely, obviously there's loads that we could talk about. So I think I'll definitely get in touch with you again to do one in the near future. And if I can bring you people out to the forefront, A, I get to learn loads. B, I get to have these brilliant conversations. But C, the side effect is I then get to share this with everyone else. And so far, touch wood, people seem to enjoy it and seem to listen.
I think, I enjoy the podcast, and I get to learn a lot from them. So I'm glad I'm on the list. I'm glad you reached out, because I was just listening to the ones that were done, and I was like, these are good ways to pass time. But Waiguru, thank you very much, Ahmed.
No, not a problem. I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time out on a Sunday morning to do this, and also just for sharing everything so frankly and honestly. Really appreciate it. I will obviously include the links to your social media pages and the website in the description. Equally, if people, I insist everyone listening to this, if you're ever in or around London, please book one of these tours, because it obviously helps everyone, and equally you'll get to learn a lot. And obviously, as we've spoken about, there's loads of tours in Europe and kind of further afield. So if you're interested in them, also
I'll get more of the program out and about. There's about 3 tours out now, but every month I give it, and then I'll just start launch. Takes the prep then a month in advance, Sweet. So we get our April ones, but that's good. But love it. Thank you for the
no problem. Thank you so much. I will leave you to the rest of your Sunday. I hope you have a great day, and I will be in touch very soon. So you've made it to the end of another podcast episode. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I did. Please make sure to let me know the good bits or even the bad bits of the podcast in the comments below. Also, don't forget, you can let me know if there are any guests that you wish to see on the podcast or any other video ideas. Otherwise than that, I'll see you all in the next one.